Chapter 10 of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Brontë. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.
When all were gone, I learnt that the vile slander had indeed been circulated throughout the company, in the very presence of the victim. Rose, however, vowed she did not and would not believe it, and my mother made the same declaration, though not, I fear, with the same amount of real unwavering incredulity. It seemed to dwell continually on her mind, and she kept irritating me from time to time by such expressions as,
"Dear, dear, who would have thought it? Well, I always thought there was something odd about her. You see what it is for women to affect to be different to other people."
and once it was,
"I misdoubted that appearance of mystery from the very first. I thought there would no good come of it. But this is a sad, sad business, to be sure."
"Why, mother, you said you didn't believe these tales."
said Fergus.
"No more I do, my dear, but then, you know, there must be some foundation."
The foundation is in the wickedness and falsehood of the world, said I, and in the fact that Mr. Lawrence has been seen to go that way once or twice of an evening, and the village gossips say he goes to pay his addresses to the strange lady, and the scandal-mongers have greedily seized the rumour, to make it the basis of their own infernal structure.
"Well, but, Gilbert, there must be something in her manner to countenance such reports."
Did you see anything in her manner?
"No, certainly, but then, you know, I always said there was something strange about her."
I believe it was on that very evening that I ventured on another invasion of Wildfell Hall. From the time of our party, which was upwards of a week ago, I had been making daily efforts to meet its mistress in her walks, and, always disappointed, she must have managed it so on purpose, had nightly kept revolving in my mind some pretext for another call. At length I concluded that the separation could be endured no longer. By this time, you will see, I was pretty far gone, and, taking from the bookcase an old volume that I thought she might be interested in, though from its unsightly and somewhat dilapidated condition I had not yet ventured to offer it for perusal, I hastened away, but not without sundry misgivings as to how she would receive me, or how I could summon courage to present myself with so slight an excuse. But perhaps I might see her in the field or the garden, and then there would be no great difficulty. It was the formal knocking at the door, with the prospect of being gravely ushered in by Rachel, to the presence of a surprised, uncordial mistress, that so greatly disturbed me. My wish, however, was not gratified. Mrs. Graham herself was not to be seen, but there was Arthur, playing with his frolicsome little dog in the garden. I looked over the gate and called him to me. He wanted me to come in, but I told him I could not without his mother's leave.
"I'll go and ask her,"
said the child. No, no, Arthur, you mustn't do that. But if she's not engaged, just ask her to come here a minute. Tell her I want to speak to her. He ran to perform my bidding, and quickly returned with his mother. How lovely she looked, with her dark ringlets streaming in the light summer breeze, her fair cheek slightly flushed, and her countenance radiant with smiles. Dear Arthur, what did I not owe you for this and every other happy meeting? Through him I was at once delivered from all formality, and terror, and constraint. In love affairs, there is no mediator like a merry, simple-hearted child, ever ready to cement divided hearts, to span the unfriendly gulf of custom, to melt the ice of cold reserve, and overthrow the separating walls of dread formality and pride.
"Well, Mr. Markham, what is it?"
said the young mother, accosting me with a pleasant smile. "I want you to look at this book, and if you please to take it, and peruse it at your leisure. I make no apology for calling you out on such a lovely evening, though it be for a matter of no greater importance."
"Tell him to come in, mamma,"
said Arthur.
"Would you like to come in?"
asked the lady. "Yes, I should like to see your improvements in the garden."
"And how your sister's roots have prospered in my charge,"
added she, as she opened the gate. And we sauntered through the garden, and talked of the flowers, the trees, and the book, and then of other things. The evening was kind and genial, and so was my companion, By degrees I waxed more warm and tender than perhaps I had ever been before, but still I said nothing tangible, and she attempted no repulse, until in passing a moss rose tree that I had brought her some weeks since, in my sister's name, she plucked a beautiful half-open bud, and bade me give it to Rose. May I not keep it myself? I asked.
No, but here is another for you.
Instead of taking it quietly, I likewise took the hand that offered it, and looked into her face. She let me hold it for a moment, and I saw a flash of ecstatic brilliance in her eye, a glow of glad excitement on her face. I thought my hour of victory was come, but instantly a painful recollection seemed to flash upon her. A cloud of anguish darkened her brow, a marble paleness blanched her cheek and lip. There seemed a moment of inward conflict, and with a sudden effort she withdrew her hand, and retreated a step or two back.
Now, Mr. Markham,
said she, with a kind of desperate calmness,
I must tell you plainly that I cannot do with this. I like your company, because I am alone here, and your conversation pleases me more than that of any other person. But if you cannot be content to regard me as a friend, a plain, cold, motherly, or sisterly friend, I must beg you to leave me now, and let me alone hereafter. In fact, we must be strangers for the future.
I will, then, be your friend, or brother, or anything you wish, if you will only let me continue to see you. But tell me why I cannot be anything more. There was a perplexed and thoughtful pause. Is it in consequence of some rash vow?
It is something of the kind,
she answered.
Some day I may tell you, but at present you had better leave me, and never, Gilbert, put me to the painful necessity of repeating what I have just now said to you,
she earnestly added, giving me her hand in serious kindness. How sweet, how musical my own name sounded in her mouth. I will not, I replied, but you pardon this offence.
On condition that you never repeat it.
And may I come and see you now and then?
Perhaps, occasionally, provided you never abuse the privilege.
I make no empty promises, but you shall see.
The moment you do, our intimacy is at an end, that's all.
And will you always call me Gilbert? It sounds more sisterly, and it will serve to remind me of our contract. She smiled, and once more bid me go. And at length I judged it prudent to obey, and she re-entered the house, and I went down the hill. But as I went, the tramp of horses' hoofs fell on my ear, and broke the stillness of the dewy evening, and, looking towards the lane, I saw a solitary equestrian coming up. Inclining to dusk as it was, I knew him at a glance. It was Mr. Lawrence on his grey pony. I flew across the field, leaped the stone fence, and then walked down the lane to meet him. On seeing me, he suddenly drew in his little steed, and seemed inclined to turn back, but on second thought apparently judged it better to continue his course as before. He accosted me with a slight bow, and, edging close to the wall, endeavoured to pass on, but I was not so minded. Seizing his horse by the bridle, I exclaimed, Now, Lawrence, I will have this mystery explained. Tell me where you are going, and what you mean to do, at once and distinctly.
Will you take your hand off the bridle?
Said he quietly.
You're hurting my pony's mouth.
You and your pony be.
What makes you so coarse and brutal, Markham? I'm quite ashamed of you.
You answer my questions. Before you leave this spot, I will know what you mean by this perfidious duplicity.
I shall answer no questions till you let go the bridle, if you stand till morning.
Now then, said I, unclosing my hand, but still standing before him.
Ask me some other time, when you can speak like a gentleman,
returned he, and he made an effort to pass me again. But I quickly recaptured the pony, scarce less astonished than its master at such uncivil usage.
Really, Mr. Markham, this is too much,
said the latter.
Can I not go to see my tenant on matters of business without being assaulted in this manner by—
This is no time for business, sir. I'll tell you now what I think of your conduct.
You'd better defer your opinion to a more convenient season,
interrupted he in a low tone.
Here's the vicar.
And in truth, the vicar was just behind me, plodding homeward from some remote corner of his parish. I immediately released the squire, and he went on his way, saluting Mr. Millward as he passed.
"What, quarrelling, Markham?"
cried the latter, addressing himself to me.
"And about that young widow, I doubt,"
he added, reproachfully shaking his head.
"But let me tell you, young man,"
here he put his face into mine, with an important, confidential air,
"she's not worth it."
and he confirmed the assertion by a solemn nod.
"Mr. Millward!"
I exclaimed, in a tone of wrathful menace that made the reverend gentleman look round, aghast, astounded at such unwonted insolence, and stare me in the face with a look that plainly said,
"What? This to me?"
But I was too indignant to apologize, or to speak another word to him. I turned away, and hastened homewards, descending with rapid strides the steep rough lane, and leaving him to follow as he pleased.
End of chapter 10. Chapter 11 of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, by Anne Brontë. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.
You must suppose about 3 weeks passed over. Mrs. Graham and I were now established friends, or brother and sister, as we rather chose to consider ourselves. She called me Gilbert by my express desire, and I called her Helen, for I had seen that name written in her books. I seldom attempted to see her above twice a week, and still I made our meetings appear the result of accident as often as I could, for I found it necessary to be extremely careful, and altogether I behaved with such exceeding propriety that she never had occasion to reprove me once. Yet I could not but perceive that she was at times unhappy and dissatisfied with herself or her position, and truly I myself was not quite contented with the latter. This assumption of brotherly nonchalance was very hard to sustain, and I often felt myself a most confounded hypocrite with it all. I saw too, or rather I felt, that in spite of herself I was not indifferent to her, as the novel heroes modestly express it, and while I thankfully enjoyed my present good fortune, I could not fail to wish and hope for something better in future. But of course I kept such dreams entirely to myself.
"Where you going, Gilbert?"
said Rose one evening shortly after tea, when I had been busy with the farm all day. "To take a walk," was the reply.
"Do you always brush your hat so carefully, and do your hair so nicely, and put on such smart new gloves when you take a walk?"
"Not always."
"You're going to Wildfell Hall, aren't you?"
"What makes you think so?"
"Because you look as if you were. But I wish you wouldn't go so often."
"Nonsense, child. I don't go once in 6 weeks. What do you mean?"
"Well, but if I were you, I wouldn't have so much to do with Mrs. Graham."
"Why, Rose, are you too giving in to the prevailing opinion?"
"No,
returned she, hesitatingly.
but I've heard so much about her lately, both at the Wilsons' and the vicarage, and besides, Mamma says if she were a proper person she would not be living there by herself. And don't you remember last winter, Gilbert, all that about the false name to the picture, and how she explained it, saying she had friends or acquaintances from whom she wished her present residence to be concealed, and that she was afraid of their tracing her out, and then how suddenly she started up and left the room when that person came, whom she took good care not to let us catch a glimpse of, and who Arthur, with such an air of mystery, told us was his mamma's friend."
"Yes, Rose, I remember it all, and I can forgive your uncharitable conclusions, for perhaps if I did not know her myself, I should put all these things together and believe the same as you do. But thank God I do know her, and I should be unworthy the name of a man if I could believe anything that was said against her. Unless I heard it from her own lips, I should as soon believe such things of you, Rose."
"Oh, Gilbert!"
"Well, do you think I could believe anything of the kind, whatever the Wilsons and Millwards dared to whisper?"
"I should hope not, indeed."
"And why not? Because I know you well, and I know her just as well."
"Oh, no, you know nothing of her former life, and last year, at this time, you did not know that such a person existed."
"No matter. There is such a thing as looking through a person's eyes into the heart, and learning more of the height and breadth and depth of another's soul in 1 hour than it might take you a lifetime to discover, if he or she were not disposed to reveal it, or if you had not the sense to understand it."
"Then you are going to see her this evening?"
"To be sure I am."
"But what would Mamma say, Gilbert?"
Mamma needn't know.
But she must know sometime, if you go on.
Go on. There's no going on in the matter. Mrs. Graham and I are two friends, and will be, and no man breathing shall hinder it, or has a right to interfere between us.
But if you knew how they took, you would be more careful, for her sake as well as for your own. Jane Wilson thinks your visits to the old hall but another proof of her depravity.
Confound Jane Wilson.
And Eliza Millward is quite grieved about you.
I hope she is.
But I wouldn't if I were you.
Wouldn't what? How do they know that I go there?
There's nothing hid from them. They spy out everything.
Oh, I never thought of this. And so they dare to turn my friendship into food for further scandal against her. That proves the falsehood of their other lies at all events, if any proof were wanting. Mind you contradict them, Rose, whenever you can.
But they don't speak openly to me about such things. It is only by hints and innuendos, and by what I hear others say, that I knew what they think.
Well, then I won't go today, as it's getting latish, but oh, deuce take their cursed, envenomed tongues, I muttered, in the bitterness of my soul. And just at that moment the vicar entered the room. We had been too much absorbed in our conversation to observe his knock. After his customary cheerful and fatherly greeting of Rose, who was rather a favourite with the old gentleman, he turned somewhat sternly to me.
"Well, sir,"
said he,
"you're quite a stranger. It is... let me see."
He continued slowly as he deposited his ponderous bulk in the armchair that Rose officiously brought towards him.
"It is just 6 weeks, by my reckoning, since you darkened my door."
He spoke it with emphasis, and struck his stick on the floor. "Is it, sir?" said I.
"Aye, it is so."
He added an affirmatory nod, and continued to gaze upon me with a kind of irate solemnity, holding his substantial stick between his knees, with his hands clasped upon its head. "I have been busy," I said, for an apology was evidently demanded.
"Busy?"
repeated he derisively. "Yes, you know I've been getting in my hay, and now the harvest is beginning." Just then my mother came in, and created a diversion in my favour by her loquacious and animated welcome of the reverend guest. She regretted deeply that he had not come a little earlier, in time for tea, but offered to have some immediately prepared, if he would do her the favour to partake of it.
"Not any for me, I thank you,"
replied he.
"I shall be at home in a few minutes."
Oh, but do stay and take a little. It will be ready in 5 minutes.
But he rejected the offer with a majestic wave of the hand.
"I'll tell you what I'll take, Mrs. Markham,"
said he.
"I'll take a glass of your excellent ale."
With pleasure,
cried my mother, proceeding with alacrity to pull the bell and order the favoured beverage.
"I thought,"
continued he,
"I'd just look in upon you as I passed and taste your home-brewed ale. I've been to call on Mrs. Graham."
Have you indeed?
He nodded gravely, and added with awful emphasis,
"I thought it incumbent upon me to do so."
Really?
ejaculated my mother. "Why so, Mr. Millward?" asked I. He looked at me with some severity, and turning again to my mother, repeated,
"I thought it incumbent upon me,"
and struck his stick on the floor again. My mother sat opposite, an awestruck but admiring auditor.
"Mrs. Graham," said I,
he continued, shaking his head as he spoke,
"these are terrible reports. What, sir?" says she, affecting to be ignorant of my meaning. "It is my duty as your pastor," said I, "to tell you both everything that I myself see reprehensible in your conduct, and all I have reason to suspect, and what others tell me concerning you." So I told her.
"You did, sir?" cried I, starting from my seat and striking my fist on the table. He merely glanced towards me, and continued, addressing his hostess.
"It was a painful duty, Mrs. Markham, but I told her."
And how did she take it?
asked my mother.
"Oh, hardened, I fear, hardened,"
he replied with a despondent shake of the head.
"And at the same time there was a strong display of unchastened, misdirected passions. She turned white in the face, and drew her breath through her teeth in a savage sort of way. but she offered no extenuation or defence, and with a kind of shameless calmness, shocking indeed to witness in one so young, as good as told me that my remonstrance was unavailing, and my pastoral advice quite thrown away upon her. Nay, that my very presence was displeasing while I spoke such things. And I withdrew at length, too plainly seeing that nothing could be done, and sadly grieved to find her case so hopeless. But I am fully determined, Mrs. Markham, that my daughters shall not consort with her. Do you adopt the same resolution with regard to yours? As for your sons, as for you, young man,"
he continued, sternly turning to me. "As for me, sir," I began, but checked by some impediment in my utterance, and finding that my whole frame trembled with fury, I said no more, but took the wiser part of snatching up my hat and bolting from the room, slamming the door behind me with a bang that shook the house to its foundations, and made my mother scream, and gave a momentary relief to my excited feelings. The next minute saw me hurrying with rapid strides in the direction of Wildfell Hall. To what intent or purpose I could scarcely tell, but I must be moving somewhere, and no other goal would do. I must see her too, and speak to her, that was certain. But what to say, or how to act, I had no definite idea. Such stormy thoughts, so many different resolutions, crowded in upon me, that my mind was little better than a chaos of conflicting passions.
End of chapter 11. Chapter 12 of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, by Anne Brontë. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.
In little more than 20 minutes the journey was accomplished. I paused at the gate to wipe my streaming forehead and recover my breath and some degree of composure. Already the rapid walking had somewhat mitigated my excitement, and with a firm and steady tread I paced the garden walk. In passing the inhabited wing of the building, I caught a sight of Mrs. Graham through the open window, slowly pacing up and down her lonely room. She seemed agitated and even dismayed at my arrival, as if she thought I too was coming to accuse her. I had entered her presence intending to condole with her upon the wickedness of the world, and help her to abuse the vicar and his vile informants. But now I felt positively ashamed to mention the subject, and determined not to refer to it, unless she led the way. "I am come at an unseasonable hour," said I, assuming a cheerfulness I did not feel, in order to reassure her, "but I won't stay many minutes." She smiled upon me, faintly it is true, but most kindly. I had almost said thankfully, as her apprehensions were removed. "How dismal you are, Helen! Why have you no fire?" I said, looking round on the gloomy apartment.
"It is summer yet,"
she replied, "but we always have a fire in the evenings, if we can bear it, and you especially require one in this cold house and dreary room."
"You should have come a little sooner, and I would have had one lighted for you. But it is not worth while now. You won't stay many minutes, you say, and Arthur is gone to bed."
"But I have a fancy for a fire, nevertheless. Will you order one if I ring?"
"Why, Gilbert, you don't look cold,"
said she, smilingly regarding my face, which no doubt seemed warm enough. "No," replied I, "but I want to see you comfortable before I go."
"Me comfortable,"
repeated she, with a bitter laugh, as if there were something amusingly absurd in the idea.
"It suits me better as it is,"
she added, in a tone of mournful resignation. But determined to have my own way, I pulled the bell. "There now, Helen," I said, as the approaching steps of Rachel were heard in answer to the summons. There was nothing for it but to turn round and desire the maid to light the fire. I owe Rachel a grudge to this day for the look she cast upon me ere she departed on her mission, the sour, suspicious, inquisitorial look that plainly demanded,
"What are you here for, I wonder?"
Her mistress did not fail to notice it, and a shade of uneasiness darkened her brow.
"You must not stay long, Gilbert,"
said she, when the door was closed upon us. "I'm not going to," said I, somewhat testily, though without a grain of anger in my heart against anyone but the meddling old woman. "But, Helen, I've something to say to you before I go."
"What is it?"
No, not now. I don't know yet precisely what it is, or how to say it, replied I, with more truth than wisdom, and then, fearing lest she should turn me out of the house, I began talking about indifferent matters in order to gain time. Meanwhile Rachel came in to kindle the fire, which was soon effected by thrusting a red-hot poker between the bars of the grate, where the fuel was already disposed for ignition. She honoured me with another of her hard, inhospitable looks in departing, but little moved thereby. I went on talking, and setting a chair for Mrs. Graham on one side of the hearth, and one for myself on the other, I ventured to sit down, though half suspecting she would rather see me go. In a little while we both relapsed into silence, and continued for several minutes gazing abstractly into the fire, she intent upon her own sad thoughts, and I reflecting how delightful it would be to be seated thus beside her, with no other presence to restrain our intercourse, not even that of Arthur, our mutual friend, without whom we had never met before. If only I could venture to speak my mind, and disburden my full heart of the feelings that had so long oppressed it, and which it now struggled to retain, with an effort that it seemed impossible to continue much longer, and revolving the pros and cons for opening my heart to her there and then, and imploring a return of affection, the permission to regard her thenceforth as my own, and the right and the power to defend her from the calumnies of malicious tongues. On the one hand, I felt a new-born confidence in my powers of persuasion, a strong conviction that my own fervour of spirit would grant me eloquence, that my very determination, the absolute necessity for succeeding, that I felt must win me what I sought, while on the other I feared to lose the ground I had already gained with so much toil and skill, and destroy all future hope by one rash effort, when time and patience might have won success. It was like setting my life upon the cast of a die, and yet I was ready to resolve upon the attempt. At any rate, I would entreat the explanation she had half promised to give me before. I would demand the reason of this hateful barrier, this mysterious impediment to my happiness, and, as I trusted, to her own. But while I considered in what manner I could best frame my request, my companion, wakened from her reverie with a scarcely audible sigh, and looking towards the window, where the blood-red harvest moon, just rising over one of the grim, fantastic evergreens, was shining in upon us, said,
"Gilbert, it is getting late."
"I see," said I. "You want me to go, I suppose."
"I think you ought. If my kind neighbours get to know of this visit, as no doubt they will not turn it much to my advantage."
It was with what the vicar would doubtless have called a savage sort of smile that she said this. "Let them turn it as they will," said I. "What are their thoughts to you or me, so long as we are satisfied with ourselves and each other? Let them go to the deuce with their vile constructions and their lying inventions." This outburst brought a flush of colour to her face.
"You have heard, then, what they say of me?"
"I heard some detestable falsehoods, but none but fools would credit them for a moment, Helen, so don't let them trouble you."
"I did not think Mr. Milward a fool, and he believes it all. But however little you may value the opinions of those about you, however little you may esteem them as individuals, it is not pleasant to be looked upon as a liar and a hypocrite, to be thought to practise what you abhor, and to encourage the vices you would discountenance, to find your good intentions frustrated, and your hands crippled by your supposed unworthiness, and to bring disgrace on the principles you profess."
"True, and if I, by my thoughtlessness and selfish disregard to appearances, have at all assisted to expose you to these evils, let me entreat you not only to pardon me, but to enable me to make reparation. Authorize me to clear your name from every imputation. Give me the right to identify your honour with my own, and to defend your reputation as more precious than my life."
"Are you hero enough to unite yourself to one whom you know to be suspected and despised by all around you, and identify your interests and your honour with hers? Think, it is a serious thing."
"I shall be proud to do it, Helen, most happy, delighted beyond expression. And if that be all the obstacle to our union, it is demolished, and you shall be mine." And starting from my seat in a frenzy of ardour, I seized her hand, and would have pressed it to my lips, but she suddenly caught it away, exclaiming in the bitterness of intense affliction,
No, no, it is not all.
What is it, then? You promised I should know some time, and—
You shall know some time, but not now. My head aches terribly,
she said, pressing her hand to her forehead.
and I must have some repose. And surely I have had misery enough to-day,
she added almost wildly. But it could not harm you to tell it, I persisted. It would ease your mind. I should then know how to comfort you. She shook her head despondingly.
If you knew all, you too would blame me, perhaps even more than I deserve, though I have cruelly wronged you,
she added in a low murmur, as if she mused aloud. You, Helen? Impossible.
Yes, not willingly, for I did not know the strength and depth of your attachment. I thought, at least I endeavoured to think, your regard for me was as cold and fraternal as you professed it to be.
Or as yours?
Or as mine ought to have been, of such a light and selfish, superficial nature that—
There indeed you wronged me.
I know I did, and sometimes I suspected it then. But I thought, upon the whole, there could be no great harm in leaving your fancies and your hopes to dream themselves to nothing, or flutter away to some more fitting object, while your friendly sympathies remained with me. But if I had known the depth of your regard, the generous, disinterested affection you seem to feel—
Seem, Helen?
That you do feel, then, I would have acted differently.
How? You could not have given me less encouragement, or treated me with greater severity than you did. And if you think you have wronged me by giving me your friendship, and occasionally admitting me to the enjoyment of your company and conversation, when all hopes of closer intimacy were vain, as indeed you always gave me to understand, if you think you have wronged me by this, you are mistaken, for such favours in themselves alone are not only delightful to my heart, but purifying, exalting, ennobling to my soul, and I would rather have your friendship than the love of any other woman in the world. Little comforted by this, she clasped her hands upon her knee, and glancing upward, seemed in silent anguish to implore divine assistance. Then turning to me, she calmly said,
Tomorrow, if you meet me on the moor about midday, I will tell you all you seek to know, and perhaps you will then see the necessity of discontinuing our intimacy, if indeed you do not willingly resign me as one no longer worthy of regard.
I can safely answer no to that. You cannot have such grave confessions to make. You must be trying my faith, Helen.
No, no, no,
she earnestly repeated.
I wish it was so. Thank heaven,
she added.
I have no great crime to confess, but I have more than you will like to hear, or perhaps can readily excuse, and more than I can tell you now. So let me entreat you to leave me.
I will, but answer me this one question first. Do you love me?
I will not answer it.
Then I will conclude you do, and so good night. She turned from me to hide the emotion she could not quite control, but I took her hand and fervently kissed it.
Gilbert, do leave me,
she cried, in a tone of such thrilling anguish that I felt it would be cruel to disobey. But I gave one look back before I closed the door, and saw her leaning forward on the table, with her hands pressed against her eyes, sobbing convulsively. Yet I withdrew in silence. I felt that to obtrude my consolations on her then would only serve to aggravate her sufferings. To tell you all the questionings and conjectures, the fears and hopes and wild emotions that jostled and chased each other through my mind as I descended the hill, would almost fill a volume in itself. But before I was halfway down, a sentiment of strong sympathy for her I had left behind me had displaced all other feelings, and seemed imperatively to draw me back. I began to think, why am I hurrying so fast in this direction? Can I find comfort or consolation, peace, certainty, contentment, all, or anything that I want at home? And can I leave all perturbation, sorrow, and anxiety behind me there? And I turned round to look at the old hall. There was little besides the chimneys visible above my contracted horizon. I walked back to get a better view of it. When it rose in sight, I stood still a moment to look, and then continued moving towards the gloomy object of attraction. Something called me nearer, nearer still, and why not, pray? Might I not find more benefit in the contemplation of that venerable pile, with the full moon in the cloudless heaven shining so calmly above it, with that warm yellow lustre peculiar to an August night, and the mistress of my soul within? than in returning to my home, where all comparatively was light and life and cheerfulness, and therefore inimical to me in my present frame of mind, and the more so that its inmates all were more or less imbued with that detestable belief, the very thought of which made my blood boil in my veins. And how could I endure to hear it openly declared, or cautiously insinuated? Which was worse, I had had trouble enough already, with some babbling fiend that would keep whispering in my ear, "It may be true," till I had shouted aloud, "It is false. I defy you to make me suppose it." I could see the red firelight dimly gleaming from her parlour window. I went up to the garden wall and stood leaning over it, with my eyes fixed upon the lattice, wondering what she was doing, thinking or suffering now, and wishing I could speak to her but one word, or even catch one glimpse of her before I went. I had not thus looked and wished and wondered long before I vaulted over the barrier, unable to resist the temptation of taking one glance through the window, just to see if she were more composed than when we parted, and if I found her still in deep distress, perhaps I might venture attempt a word of comfort, to utter one of the many things I should have said before, instead of aggravating her sufferings by my stupid impetuosity. I looked. Her chair was vacant. So was the room. But at that moment someone opened the outer door, and her voice said,
"Come out. I want to see the moon, and breathe the evening air. They will do me good, if anything will."
Here then were she and Rachel coming to take a walk in the garden. I wished myself safe back over the wall. I stood, however, in the shadow of the tall holly bush, which, standing between the window and the porch, at present screened me from observation, but did not prevent me from seeing two figures come forth into the moonlight, Mrs. Graham followed by another, not Rachel, but a young man, slender and rather tall. Oh heavens, how my temples throbbed! Intense anxiety darkened my sight, but I thought, yes, and the voice confirmed it. It was Mr. Lawrence.
"You should not let it worry you so much, Helen,"
said he.
"I will be more cautious in the future, and in time—"
I did not hear the rest of the sentence, for he walked close beside her, and spoke so gently that I could not catch the words. My heart was splitting with hatred, but I listened intently for her reply. I heard it plainly enough.
"But I must leave this place, Frederick,"
she said.
"I never can be happy here, nor anywhere else, indeed,"
she added, with a mirthless laugh.
"but I cannot rest here."
"But where could you find a better place?"
replied he.
"So secluded, so near me, if you think anything of that."
"Yes,"
interrupted she.
"It is all I could wish, if they could only have left me alone."
"But wherever you go, Helen, there will be the same sources of annoyance. I cannot consent to lose you. I must go with you, or come to you, and there are meddling fools elsewhere as well as here."
While thus conversing, they had sauntered slowly past me down the walk, and I heard no more of their discourse, for I saw him put his arm round her waist, while she lovingly rested her hand on his shoulder, and then a tremulous darkness obscured my sight. My heart sickened, and my head burned like fire. I half rushed, half staggered from the spot where horror had kept me rooted, and leaped or tumbled over the wall. I hardly know which, but I know that afterwards, like a passionate child, I dashed myself on the ground, and lay there in a paroxysm of anger and despair. How long I cannot undertake to say, but it must have been a considerable time. For when, having partially relieved myself by a torment of tears, and looked up at the moon, shining so calmly and carelessly on, as little influenced by my misery as I was by its peaceful radiance, and earnestly prayed for death or forgetfulness, I had risen and journeyed homewards, little regarding the way, but carried instinctively by my feet to the door. I found it bolted against me, and every one in bed except my mother, who hastened to answer my impatient knocking, and received me with a shower of questions and rebukes.
"Oh, Gilbert, how could you do so? Where have you been? Do come in and take your supper. I've got it all ready, though you don't deserve it for keeping me in such a fright. After the strange manner you left the house this evening, Mr. Milward was quite— Bless the boy, how ill he looks! Oh, gracious, what is the matter?"
Nothing, nothing. Give me a candle."
"But won't you take some supper?"
"No, I want to go to bed," said I. taking a candle and lighting it at the one she held in her hand.
"Oh, Gilbert, how you tremble!"
exclaimed my anxious parent.
"How white you look! Do tell me what it is. Has anything happened?"
"It's nothing," cried I, ready to stamp with vexation because the candle would not light. Then, suppressing my irritation, I added, "I've been walking too fast, that's all. Good night," and marched off to bed, regardless of the
"Walking too fast? Where have you been?"
that was called after me from below. My mother followed me to the very door of my room, with her questionings and advice concerning my health and my conduct, but I implored her to let me alone till morning, and she withdrew, and at length I had the satisfaction to hear her close her own door. There was no sleep for me, however, that night, as I thought, and instead of attempting to solicit it, I employed myself in rapidly pacing the chamber, having first removed my boots, lest my mother should hear me. But the boards creaked, and she was watchful. I had not walked above a quarter of an hour before she was at the door again.
"Gilbert, why are you not in bed? You said you wanted to go."
"Confound it, I'm going," said I.
"But why are you so long about it? You must have something on your mind."
"For heaven's sake, let me alone, and get to bed yourself."
"Can it be that Mrs. Graham that distresses you so?"
"No, no, I tell you, it's nothing,"
"I wish to goodness it mayn't,"
murmured she, with a sigh, as she returned to her own apartment, while I threw myself on the bed, feeling most undutifully disaffected towards her for having deprived me of what seemed the only shadow of a consolation that remained, and chained me to that wretched couch of thorns. Never did I endure so long so miserable a night as that, and yet it was not wholly sleepless. Towards morning my distracting thoughts began to lose all pretensions to coherency, and shaped themselves into confused and feverish dreams, and at length there followed an interval of unconscious slumber, but then the dawn of bitter recollection that succeeded, the waking to find life a blank, and worse than a blank, teeming with torment and misery, not a mere barren wilderness, but full of thorns and briars, to find myself deceived, duped, hopeless, my affections trampled upon, my angel not an angel, and my friend a fiend incarnate. It was worse than if I had not slept at all. It was a dull, gloomy morning. The weather had changed like my prospects, and the rain was pattering against the window. I rose nevertheless and went out, not to look after the farm, though that would serve as my excuse, but to cool my brain, and regain, if possible, a sufficient degree of composure to meet the family at the morning meal without exciting inconvenient remarks. If I got a wetting, that in conjunction with a pretended over-exertion before breakfast might excuse my sudden loss of appetite, and if a cold ensued, the severer the better, it would help to account for the sullen moods and moping melancholy likely to cloud my brow for long enough.
End of chapter 12. Chapter 13 of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, by Anne Brontë. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.
"My dear Gilbert, I wish you would try to be a little more amiable,"
said my mother one morning after some display of unjustifiable ill-humour on my part.
"You say there is nothing the matter with you, and nothing has happened to grieve you, and yet I never saw anyone so altered as you within these last few days. You haven't a good word for anybody. Friends and strangers, equals and inferiors, it's all the same. I do wish you'd try to check it."
"Check what?"
"Why, your strange temper. You don't know how it spoils you. I'm sure a finer disposition than yours by nature could not be, if you'd let it have fair play, so you've no excuse that way."
While she thus remonstrated, I took up a book, and, laying it open on the table before me, pretended to be deeply absorbed in its perusal, for I was equally unable to justify myself, and unwilling to acknowledge my errors, and I wished to have nothing to say on the matter. But my excellent parent went on lecturing, and then came to coaxing, and began to stroke my hair, and I was getting to feel quite a good boy. But my mischievous brother, who was idling about the room, revived my corruption by suddenly calling out,
"Don't touch him, mother! He'll bite! He's a very tiger in human form. I've given him up, for my part, fairly disowned him, cast him off root and branch. It's as much as my life is worth to come within 6 yards of him. The other day he nearly fractured my skull for singing a pretty, inoffensive love song on purpose to amuse him."
Oh, Gilbert, how could you?
exclaimed my mother. "I told you to hold your noise first, you know, Fergus," said I.
"Yes, but when I assured you it was no trouble and went on with the next verse, thinking you might like it better, you clutched me by the shoulder and dashed me away right against the wall there, with such force that I thought I had bitten my tongue in two and expected to see the place plastered with my brains. And when I put my hand to my head and found my skull not broken, I thought it was a miracle and no mistake. But, poor fellow,"
added he, with a sentimental sigh,
"his heart's broken. That's the truth of it. And his head's—"
"Will you be silent now?" cried I, starting up, and eyeing the fellow so fiercely that my mother, thinking I meant to inflict some grievous bodily injury, laid her hand on my arm, and besought me to let him alone, and he walked leisurely out, with his hands in his pockets, thinking provokingly,
"Shall I, because a woman's fair,"
etc. "I'm not going to defile my fingers with him," said I, in answer to the maternal intercession. "I wouldn't touch him with the tongs." I now recollected that I had business with Robert Wilson concerning the purchase of a certain field adjoining my farm, a business I had been putting off from day to day, for I had no interest in anything now, and besides I was misanthropically inclined, and moreover had a particular objection to meeting Jane Wilson or her mother, for though I had too good reason now to credit their reports concerning Mrs. Graham, I did not like them a bit the better for it, or Eliza Millward either, and the thought of meeting them was the more repugnant to me that I could not now defy their seeming calumnies and triumph in my own convictions as before, but today I determined to make an effort to return to my duty. Though I found no pleasure in it, it would be less irksome than idleness. At all events, it would be more profitable. If life promised no enjoyment within my vocation, at least it offered no allurements out of it, and henceforth I would put my shoulder to the wheel and toil away, like any poor drudge of a cart horse that was fairly broken into its labour, and plod through life, not wholly useless if not agreeable, and uncomplaining if not contented with my lot, thus resolving, with a kind of sullen resignation, if such a term may be allowed, I wended my way to Rycote Farm, scarcely expecting to find its owner within at this time of day, but hoping to learn in what part of the premises he was most likely to be found. Absent he was, but expected home in a few minutes, and I was desired to step into the parlour and wait. Mrs. Wilson was busy in the kitchen, but the room was not empty, and I scarcely checked an involuntary recoil as I entered it, for there sat Miss Wilson, chattering with Eliza Millward. However, I determined to be cool and civil. Eliza seemed to have made the same resolution on her part. We had not met since the evening of the tea-party, but there was no visible emotion either of pleasure or pain, no attempt at pathos, no display of injured pride. She was cool in temper, civil in demeanour. There was even an ease and cheerfulness about her air and manner that I made no pretension to, but there was a depth of malice in her too expressive eye that plainly told me I was not forgiven. For though she no longer hoped to win me to herself, she still hated her rival, and evidently delighted to wreak her spite on me. On the other hand, Miss Wilson was as affable and courteous as heart could wish, and though I was in no very conversible humour myself, the two ladies between them managed to keep up a pretty continuous fire of small talk. But Eliza took advantage of the first convenient pause to ask if I had lately seen Mrs. Graham, in a tone of merely casual inquiry, but with a sidelong glance intended to be playfully mischievous, really brimful and running over with malice. "Not lately," I replied, in a careless tone, but sternly repelling her odious glances with my eyes, for I was vexed to feel the colour mounting to my forehead, despite my strenuous efforts to appear unmoved.
What? Are you beginning to tire already? I thought so noble a creature would have power to attach you for a year at least.
I would rather not speak of her now.
Ah, then you are convinced at last of your mistake. You have at length discovered that your divinity is not quite the immaculate—
I desired you not to speak of her, Miss Eliza.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I perceive Cupid's arrows have been too sharp for you. The wounds, being more than skin deep, are not yet healed, and bleed afresh at every mention of the loved one's name.
Say, rather,
Interposed Miss Wilson,
that Mr. Markham feels that name is unworthy to be mentioned in the presence of right-minded females. I wonder, Eliza, you should think of referring to that unfortunate person. You might know the mention of her would be anything but agreeable to anyone here present.
how could this be borne? I rose, and was about to clap my hat upon my head, and burst away, in wrathful indignation, from the house, but recollecting, just in time to save my dignity, the folly of such a proceeding, and how it would only give my fair tormentors a merry laugh at my expense, for the sake of one I acknowledged in my own heart to be unworthy of the slightest sacrifice, though the ghost of my former reverence and love so hung about me still, that I could not bear to hear her name aspersed by others. I merely walked to the window, and, having spent a few seconds in vengefully biting my lips, and sternly repressing the passionate heavings of my chest, I observed to Miss Wilson that I could see nothing of her brother, and added that, as my time was precious, it would perhaps be better to call again to-morrow, at some time when I should be sure to find him at home.
Oh, no,
said she.
If you wait a minute, he will be sure to come, for his business at
That was our market town.
And will require a little refreshment before he goes.
I submitted accordingly, with the best grace I could, and happily I had not long to wait. Mr. Wilson soon arrived, and, indisposed for business as I was at that moment, and little as I cared for the field or its owner, I forced my attention to the matter in hand, with very creditable determination, and quickly concluded the bargain, perhaps more to the thrifty farmer's satisfaction than he cared to acknowledge. Then, leaving him to the discussion of his substantial refreshment, I gladly quitted the house, and went to look after my reapers. Leaving them busy at work on the side of the valley, I ascended the hill, intending to visit a cornfield in the more elevated regions, and see when it would be ripe for the sickle. But I did not visit it that day, for as I approached, I beheld, at no great distance, Mrs. Graham and her son coming down in the opposite direction. They saw me, and Arthur already was running to meet me, but I immediately turned back, and walked steadily homeward, for I had fully determined never to encounter his mother again, and regardless of the shrill voice in my ear, calling upon me to
Wait a moment.
I pursued the even tenor of my way, and he soon relinquished the pursuit as hopeless, or was called away by his mother. At all events, when I looked back, 5 minutes after, not a trace of either was to be seen. This incident agitated and disturbed me most unaccountably, unless you would account for it by saying that Cupid's arrows not only had been too sharp for me, but they were barbed and deeply rooted, and I had not yet been able to wrench them from my heart. However that be, I was rendered doubly miserable for the remainder of the day.
End of chapter 13. Chapter 14 of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, by Anne Brontë. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.
Next morning, I bethought me, I too had business at L. So I mounted my horse, and set forth on the expedition soon after breakfast. It was a dull, drizzly day, but that was no matter. It was all the more suitable to my frame of mind. It was likely to be a lonely journey, for it was no market day, and the road I traversed was little frequented at any other time, but that suited me all the better too. As I trotted along, however, chewing the cud of bitter fancies, I heard another horse at no great distance behind me, but I never conjectured who the rider might be, or troubled my head about him, till, on slackening my pace to ascend a gentle acclivity, or rather suffering my horse to slacken his pace into a lazy walk, for, wrapped in my own reflections, I was letting it jog on as leisurely as it thought proper, I lost ground, and my fellow traveller overtook me. He accosted me by name, for it was no stranger. It was Mr. Lawrence. Instinctively, the fingers of my whip hand tingled, and grasped their charge with convulsive energy. But I restrained the impulse, and, answering his salutation with a nod, attempted to push on. But he pushed on beside me, and began to talk about the weather and the crops. I gave the briefest possible answers to his queries and observations, and fell back. He fell back too, and asked if my horse was lame. I replied with a look, at which he placidly smiled. I was as much astonished as exasperated at this singular pertinacity and imperturbable assurance on his part. I had thought the circumstances of our last meeting would have left such an impression on his mind as to render him cold and distant ever after. Instead of that, he appeared not only to have forgotten all former offences, but to be impenetrable to all present incivilities. Formerly, the slightest hint or mere fancied coldness in tone or glance had sufficed to repulse him. Now positive rudeness could not drive him away. Had he heard of my disappointment, and was he come to witness the result and triumph in my despair? I grasped my whip with more determined energy than before, but still forbore to raise it, and rode on in silence, waiting for some more tangible cause of offence, before I opened the floodgates of my soul, and poured out the dammed-up fury that was foaming and swelling within.
"Markham," said
he, in his usual quiet tone,
"why do you quarrel with your friends, because you have been disappointed in one quarter? You have found your hopes defeated, but how am I to blame for it? I warned you beforehand, you know, but you would not."
He said no more, for, impelled by some fiend at my elbow, I had seized my whip by the small end, and, swift and sudden as a flash of lightning, brought the other down upon his head. It was not without a feeling of savage satisfaction that I beheld the instant deadly pallor that overspread his face, and the few red drops that trickled down his forehead, while he reeled a moment in his saddle, and then fell backward to the ground. The pony, surprised to be so strangely relieved of its burden, started and capered, and kicked a little, and then made use of its freedom to go and crop the grass of the hedge-bank, while its master lay as still and silent as a corpse. Had I killed him? An icy hand seemed to grasp my heart and check its pulsation as I bent over him, gazing with breathless intensity upon the ghastly upturned face. But no, he moved his eyelids and uttered a slight groan. I breathed again. He was only stunned by the fall. It served him right. It would teach him better manners in future. Should I help him to his horse? No. For any other combination of offences I would, but his were too unpardonable. He might mount it himself, if he liked, in a while. Already he was beginning to stir and look about him, and there it was for him, quietly browsing on the roadside. So with a muttered execration I left the fellow to his fate, and, clapping spurs to my own horse, galloped away, excited by a combination of feelings it would not be easy to analyse. And perhaps if I did so, the result would not be very creditable to my disposition, for I am not sure that a species of exultation in what I had done was not one principal concomitant. Shortly, however, the effervescence began to abate, and not many minutes elapsed before I had turned and gone back to look after the fate of my victim. It was no generous impulse, no kind relentings that led me to this, nor even the fear of what might be the consequences to myself if I finished my assault upon the squire by leaving him thus neglected and exposed to further injury. It was simply the voice of conscience, and I took great credit to myself for attending so promptly to its dictates, and judging the merit of the deed by the sacrifice it cost, I was not far wrong. Mr. Lawrence and his pony had both altered their positions in some degree. The pony had wandered 8 or 10 yards further away, and he had managed somehow to remove himself from the middle of the road. I found him seated in a recumbent position on the bank, looking very white and sickly still, and holding his cambric handkerchief, now more red than white, to his head. It must have been a powerful blow, but half the credit, or the blame of it, which you please, must be attributed to the whip, which was garnished with a massive horse's head of plated metal. The grass, being sodden with rain, afforded the young gentleman a rather inhospitable couch. His clothes were considerably bemired, and his hat was rolling in the mud on the other side of the road. But his thoughts seemed chiefly bent upon his pony, on which he was wistfully gazing, half in helpless anxiety, and half in hopeless abandonment to his fate. I dismounted, however, and, having fastened my own animal to the nearest tree, first picked up his hat, intending to clap it on his head, but either he considered his head unfit for a hat, or the hat in its present condition unfit for his head, for shrinking away the one, he took the other from my hand, and scornfully cast it aside. "It's good enough for you," I muttered. My next good office was to catch his pony and bring it to him, which was soon accomplished, for the beast was quiet enough in the main, and only winced and flirted a trifle till I got hold of the bridle, but then I must see him in the saddle. "Here, you fellow, scoundrel dog, give me your hand, and I'll help you to mount." No, he turned from me in disgust. I attempted to take him by the arm. He shrank away as if there had been contamination in my touch. "What, you won't? Well, you may sit there till doomsday, for what I care. But I suppose you don't want to lose all the blood in your body. I'll just condescend to bind that up for you."
Let me alone, if you please.
"With all my heart. You may go to the devil if you choose, and say I sent you." But before I abandoned him to his fate, I flung his pony's bridle over a stake in the hedge, and threw him my handkerchief, as his own was now saturated with blood. He took it and cast it back to me in abhorrence and contempt, with all the strength he could muster. It wanted but this to fill the measure of his offences. With execrations not loud but deep, I left him to live or die as he could, well satisfied that I had done my duty in attempting to save him, but forgetting how I had erred in bringing him into such a condition, and how insultingly my after services had been offered, and sullenly prepared to meet the consequences, if he should choose to say I had attempted to murder him, which I thought not unlikely, as it seemed probable he was actuated by such spiteful motives in so perseveringly refusing my assistance. Having remounted my horse, I just looked back to see how he was getting on before I rode away. He had risen from the ground, and, grasping his pony's mane, was attempting to resume his seat in the saddle, but scarcely had he put his foot in the stirrup, when a sickness or dizziness seemed to overpower him. He leant forward a moment, with his head drooped on the animal's back, and then made one more effort, which, proving ineffectual, he sank back on the bank, where I left him, reposing his head on the oozy turf, and, to all appearance, as calmly reclining as if he had been taking his rest on his sofa at home. I ought to have helped him in spite of himself, to have bound up the wound he was unable to staunch, and insisted upon getting him on his horse and seeing him safe home. But besides my bitter indignation against himself, there was the question what to say to his servants, and what to my own family. Either I should have to acknowledge the deed, which would set me down as a madman, unless I acknowledged the motive too, and that seemed impossible, or I must get up a lie, which seemed equally out of the question, especially as Mr. Lawrence would probably reveal the whole truth, and thereby bring me to tenfold disgrace, unless I were villain enough, presuming on the absence of witnesses, to persist in my own version of the case, and make him out a still greater scoundrel than he was. No, he had only received a cut above the temple, and perhaps a few bruises from the fall, or the hoofs of his own pony. That could not kill him if he lay there half the day, and if he could not help himself, surely someone would be coming by. It would be impossible that a whole day should pass and no one traverse the road but ourselves. As for what he might choose to say hereafter, I would take my chance about it. If he told lies, I would contradict him. If he told the truth, I would bear it as best I could. I was not obliged to enter into explanations further than I thought proper. Perhaps he might choose to be silent on the subject, for fear of raising inquiries as to the cause of the quarrel, and drawing the public attention to his connection with Mrs. Graham, which, whether for her sake or his own, he seemed so very desirous to conceal. Thus reasoning, I trotted away to the town, where I duly transacted my business, and performed various little commissions for my mother and Rose, with very laudable exactitude, considering the different circumstances of the case. In returning home, I was troubled with sundry misgivings about the unfortunate Lawrence. The question, what if I should find him lying still on the damp earth, fairly dying of cold and exhaustion, or already stark and chill, thrust itself most unpleasantly upon my mind, and the appalling possibility pictured itself with painful vividness to my imagination as I approached the spot where I had left him. But no, thank heaven, both man and horse were gone, and nothing was left to witness against me but two objects, unpleasant enough in themselves to be sure, and presenting a very ugly, not to say murderous, appearance. In one place the hat, saturated with rain and coated with mud, indented and broken above the brim by that villainous whip-handle. In another, the crimson handkerchief, soaking in a deeply tinctured pool of water, for much rain had fallen in the interim. Bad news flies fast. It was hardly 4 o'clock when I got home, but my mother gravely accosted me with,
"Oh, Gilbert, such an accident! Rose has been shopping in the village, and she's heard that Mr. Lawrence has been thrown from his horse and brought home, dying."
This shocked me a trifle, as you may suppose, but I was comforted to hear that he had frightfully fractured his skull and broken a leg, for assured of the falsehood of this, I trusted the rest of the story was equally exaggerated, and when I heard my mother and sister so feelingly deploring his condition, I had considerable difficulty in preventing myself from telling them the real extent of the injuries, as far as I knew them.
"You must go and see him tomorrow,"
said my mother.
"Or today,"
suggested Rose.
"There's plenty of time, and you can have the pony, as your horse is tired. Won't you, Gilbert, as soon as you've had something to eat?"
No, no. How can we tell that it isn't all a false report? It's highly
"Oh, I'm sure it isn't, for the village is all alive about it, and I saw 2 people that had seen others that had seen the man that found him. That sounds far-fetched, but it isn't so when you think of it."
Well, but Lawrence is a good rider. It is not likely he would fall from his horse at all, and if he did, it is highly improbable he would break his bones in that way. It must be a gross exaggeration at least.
"No, but the horse kicked him, or something."
What? His quiet little pony?
"How do you know it was that?"
He seldom rides any other,"
"At any rate,"
said my mother,
"you will call tomorrow. Whether it be true or false, exaggerated or otherwise, we shall like to know how he is."
Fergus may go.
"Why not you?"
He has more time. I am busy just now."
"Oh, but Gilbert, how can you be so composed about it? You won't mind business for an hour or two in a case of this sort, when your friend is at the point of death."
He is not, I tell you.
"For anything you know, he may be. You can't tell till you have seen him. At all events, he must have met with some terrible accident, and you ought to see him. He'll take it very unkind if you don't."
"Confound it, I can't. He and I have not been on good terms of late."
"Oh, my dear boy, surely you were not so unforgiving as to carry your little difference to such a length as—"
"Little differences indeed," I muttered.
"Well, but only remember the occasion. Think how—"
Well, well, don't bother me now. I'll see about it," I replied. And my seeing about it was to send Fergus next morning, with my mother's compliments, to make the requisite inquiries, for of course my going was out of the question, or sending a message either. He brought back intelligence that the young squire was laid up with the complicated evils of a broken head and certain contusions occasioned by a fall, of which he did not trouble himself to relate the particulars, and the subsequent misconduct of his horse, and a severe cold, the consequence of lying on the wet ground in the rain. But there were no broken bones, and no immediate prospects of dissolution. It was evident then that for Mrs. Graham's sake it was not his intention to criminate me.
End of chapter 14. Chapter 15 of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, by Anne Brontë. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.
That day was rainy like its predecessor, but towards evening it began to clear up a little, and the next morning was fair and promising. I was out on the hill with the reapers. A light wind swept over the corn, and all nature laughed in the sunshine. The lark was rejoicing among the silvery floating clouds. The late rain had so sweetly freshened and cleared the air, and washed the sky, and left such glittering gems on branch and blade, that not even the farmers could have the heart to blame it. But no ray of sunshine could reach my heart, no breeze could freshen it. Nothing could fill the void my faith and hope and joy in Helen Graham had left, or drive away the keen regrets and bitter dregs of lingering love that still oppressed it. While I stood with folded arms, abstractly gazing on the undulating swell of the corn, not yet disturbed by the reapers, something gently pulled at my skirts, and a small voice, no longer welcome to my ears, aroused me with the startling words,
"Mr. Markham, Mamma wants you."
"Wants me, Arthur?"
"Yes. Why do you look so queer?"
said he, half laughing, half frightened at the unexpected aspect of my face, in suddenly turning towards him.
"And why have you kept away so long? Come, won't you come?"
"I'm busy just now," I replied, scarce knowing what to answer. He looked up in childish bewilderment, but before I could speak again, the lady herself was at my side.
"Gilbert, I must speak with you,"
said she, in a tone of suppressed vehemence. I looked at her pale cheek and glittering eye, but answered nothing.
"Only for a moment,"
pleaded she.
"Just step aside into this other field."
She glanced at the reapers, some of whom were directing looks of impertinent curiosity towards her.
"I won't keep you a minute."
I accompanied her through the gap.
"Arthur, darling, run and gather those bluebells," said
she, pointing to some that were gleaming at some distance under the hedge along which we walked. The child hesitated, as if unwilling to quit my side.
"Go, love,"
repeated she more urgently, and in a tone which, though not unkind, demanded prompt obedience, and obtained it. "Well, Mrs. Graham," said I, calmly and coldly, for though I saw she was miserable, and pitied her, I felt glad to have it in my power to torment her. She fixed her eyes upon me with a look that pierced me to the heart, and yet it made me smile.
"I don't ask the reason of this change, Gilbert,"
said she, with bitter calmness.
"I know it too well. But though I could see myself suspected and condemned by every one else, and bear it with calmness, I cannot endure it from you. Why did you not come to hear my explanation on the day I appointed to give it?"
"Because I happened in the interim to learn all you would have told me, and a trifle more, I imagine."
"Impossible, for I would have told you all,"
cried she passionately.
But I won't now, for I see you are not worthy of it.
And her pale lips quivered with agitation. Why not, may I ask? She repelled my mocking smile with a glance of scornful indignation.
Because you never understood me, or you would not soon have listened to my traducers. My confidence would be misplaced in you. You are not the man I thought you. Go, I won't care what you think of me.
She turned away, and I went, for I thought that would torment her as much as anything, and I believe I was right, for looking back a minute after, I saw her turn half round, as if hoping or expecting to find me still beside her, and then she stood still, and cast one look behind. It was a look less expressive of anger than of bitter anguish and despair, but I immediately assumed an aspect of indifference, and affected to be gazing carelessly around me, and I suppose she went on, for after lingering a while to see if she would come back or call, I ventured one more glance, and saw her a good way off, moving rapidly up the field, with little Arthur running by her side, and apparently talking as he went, but she kept her face averted from him, as if to hide some uncontrollable emotion, and I returned to my business. But I soon began to regret my precipitancy in leaving her so soon. It was evident she loved me. Probably she was tired of Mr. Lawrence, and wished to exchange him for me, and if I had loved and reverenced her less to begin with, the preference might have gratified and amused me. But now the contrast between her outward seeming and her inward mind, as I supposed, between my former and my present opinion of her, was so harrowing, so distressing to my feelings, that it swallowed up every lighter consideration. But still I was curious to know what sort of an explanation she would have given me, or would give now, if I pressed her for it, how much she would confess, and how she would endeavour to excuse herself. I longed to know what to despise, and what to admire in her, how much to pity, and how much to hate, and, what was more, I would know. I would see her once more, and fairly satisfy myself in what light to regard her, before we parted. Lost to me she was, for ever of course, but still I could not bear to think that we had parted for the last time with so much unkindness and misery on both sides. That last look of hers had sunk into my heart. I could not forget it. But what a fool I was! Had she not deceived me, injured me, blighted my happiness for life? Well, I'll see her, however, was my concluding resolve, but not to-day. To-day and to-night she may think upon her sins, and be as miserable as she will. To-morrow I will see her once again, and know something more about her. The interview may be serviceable to her, or it may not. At any rate, it will give a breath of excitement to the life she has doomed to stagnation, and it may calm with certainty some agitating thoughts. I did go on the morrow, but not till towards evening, after the business of the day was concluded, that is, between 6 and 7, and the westering sun was gleaming redly on the old hall, and flaming in the lattice windows, as I reached it, imparting to the place a cheerfulness not its own. I need not dilate upon the feelings with which I approached the shrine of my former divinity, that spot teeming with 1,000 delightful recollections and glorious dreams, all darkened now by one disastrous truth. Rachel admitted me into the parlour, and went to call her mistress, for she was not there, but there was her desk, left open on the little round table beside the high-backed chair, with the book laid upon it. Her limited but choice collection of books was almost as familiar to me as my own, but this volume I had not seen before. I took it up. It was Sir Humphrey Davy's Last Days of a Philosopher, and on the first leaf was written Frederick Lawrence. I closed the book, but kept it in my hand, and stood facing the door with my back to the fireplace, calmly waiting her arrival, for I did not doubt she would come, and soon I heard her step in the hall. My heart was beginning to throb, but I checked it with an internal rebuke, and maintained my composure, outwardly at least. She entered, calm, pale, collected.
To what am I indebted for this favour, Mr. Markham?
Said she, with such severe but quiet dignity as almost disconcerted me. But I answered with a smile, and impudently enough, "Well, I am come to hear your explanation,"
I told you I would not give it.
said she.
I said you were unworthy of my confidence.
"Oh, very well," replied I, moving to the door.
Stay a moment,
said she.
This is the last time I shall see you. Don't go just yet.
I remained, awaiting her further commands.
Tell me,
Resumed she,
on what grounds you believe these things against me? Who told you, and what did they say?
I paused a moment. She met my eye as unflinchingly as if her bosom had been steeled with conscious innocence. She was resolved to know the worst, and determined to dare it too. I can crush that bold spirit, thought I. But while I secretly exulted in my power, I felt disposed to dally with my victim like a cat, showing her the book that I still held in my hand, and pointing to the name on the fly-leaf. But fixing my eye upon her face, I asked, "Do you know that gentleman?"
Of course I do,
replied she, and a sudden flush suffused her features. Whether of shame or anger, I could not tell. It rather resembled the latter.
What next, sir?
How long is it since you saw him?
Who gave you the right to catechise me on this or any other subject?
Oh, no one. It's quite at your option whether to answer or not. And now, let me ask, have you heard what has lately befallen this friend of yours? Because, if you have not—
I will not be insulted, Mr. Markham,
cried she, almost infuriated at my manner.
So you had better leave the house at once, if you came only for that.
I did not come to insult you. I came to hear your explanation.
And I tell you I won't give it,
retorted she, pacing the room in a state of strong excitement, with her hands clasped tightly together, breathing short and flashing fires of indignation from her eyes.
I will not condescend to explain myself to one that can make a jest of such horrible suspicions, and be so easily led to entertain them.
I do not make jest of them, Mrs. Graham, returned I, dropping at once my tone of taunting sarcasm. I heartily wish I could find them a jesting matter. And as to being easily led to suspect, God only knows what a blind, incredulous fool I have hitherto been, perseveringly shutting my eyes and stopping my ears against everything that threatened to shake my confidence in you, till proof itself confounded my infatuation.
What proof, sir?
Well, I'll tell you. You remember that evening when I was here last?
I do.
Even then you dropped some hints that might have opened the eyes of a wiser man, but they had no such effect upon me. I went on trusting and believing, hoping against hope, and adoring where I could not comprehend. It so happened, however, that after I left you, I turned back, drawn by pure depth of sympathy and ardour of affection, not daring to intrude my presence openly upon you, but unable to resist the temptation of catching one glimpse through the window, just to see how you were, for I had left you apparently in great affliction, and I partly blamed my own want of forbearance and discretion as the cause of it. If I did wrong, love alone was my incentive, and the punishment was severe enough, for it was just as I had reached that tree that you came out into the garden with your friend. Not choosing to show myself under the circumstances, I stood still in the shadow till you had both passed by.
And how much of our conversation did you hear?
I heard quite enough, Helen, and it was well for me that I did hear it, for nothing less could have cured my infatuation. I always said and thought that I would never believe a word against you, unless I heard it from your own lips. All the hints and affirmations of others I treated as malignant, baseless slanders. Your own self-accusations I believed to be overstrained, and all that seemed unaccountable in your position I trusted that you could account for if you chose. Mrs. Graham had discontinued her walk. She leant against one end of the chimney-piece, opposite that near which I was standing, with her chin resting on her closed hand, her eyes no longer burning with anger, but gleaming with restless excitement, sometimes glancing at me while I spoke, then coursing the opposite wall, or fixed upon the carpet.
You should have come to me after all,
said she,
and heard what I had to say in my own justification. It was ungenerous and wrong to withdraw yourself so secretly and suddenly, immediately after such ardent protestations of attachment, without ever assigning a reason for the change. You should have told me all, no matter how bitterly. It would have been better than this silence.
To what end should I have done so? You could not have enlightened me further on the subject which alone concerned me, nor could you have made me discredit the evidence of my senses. I desired our intimacy to be discontinued at once, as you yourself had acknowledged would probably be the case if I knew all. But I did not wish to upbraid you, though, as you also acknowledged, you had deeply wronged me. Yes, you have done me an injury you can never repair, or any other either. You have blighted the freshness and promise of youth, and made my life a wilderness. I might live 100 years, but I could never recover from the effects of this withering blow, and never forget it. Hereafter— You smile, Mrs. Graham, said I, suddenly stopping short, checked in my passionate declamation by unutterable feelings to behold her actually smiling at the picture of the ruin she had wrought.
Did I?
Replied she, looking seriously up.
I was not aware of it. If I did, it was not for pleasure at the thoughts of the harm I had done you. Heaven knows I have had torment enough at the bare possibility of that. It was for joy to find that you had some depth of soul and feeling after all, and to hope that I had not been utterly mistaken in your worth. But smiles and tears are so alike with me. They are neither of them confined to any particular feelings. I often cry when I am happy, and smile when I am sad.
She looked at me again, and seemed to expect a reply, but I continued silent.
Would you be very glad,
resumed she,
to find that you were mistaken in your conclusions?
How can you ask it, Helen?
I don't say I can clear myself altogether,
said she, speaking low and fast, while her heart beat visibly, and her bosom heaved with excitement.
But would you be glad to discover I was better than you think me?
Anything that could, in the least degree, tend to restore my former opinion of you, to excuse the regard I still feel for you, and alleviate the pangs of unutterable regret that accompany it, would be only too gladly, too eagerly received. Her cheeks burned, and her whole frame trembled now with excessive agitation. She did not speak, but flew to her desk, and snatching thence what seemed a thick album or manuscript volume, hastily tore away a few leaves from the end, and thrust the rest into my hand, saying,
You needn't read it all, but take it home with you,
and hurried from the room. But when I had left the house, and was proceeding down the walk, she opened the window and called me back. It was only to say,
Bring it back when you have read it, and don't breathe a word of what it tells you to any living being. I trust to your honour.
Before I could answer, she had closed the casement and turned away. I saw her cast herself back in the old oak chair, and cover her face with her hands. Her feelings had been wrought to a pitch that rendered it necessary to seek relief in tears. Panting with eagerness, and struggling to suppress my hopes, I hurried home, and rushed upstairs to my room, having first provided myself with a candle, though it was scarcely twilight yet, then shut and bolted the door, determined to tolerate no interruption, and sitting down before the table, opened out my prize, and delivered myself up to its perusal, first hastily turning over the leaves, and snatching a sentence here and there, and then setting myself steadily to read it through. I have it now before me, and though you could not, of course, peruse it with half the interest that I did, I know you would not be satisfied with an abbreviation of its contents, and you shall have the whole, save perhaps a few passages here and there of merely temporary interest to the writer, or such as would serve to encumber the story rather than elucidate it. It begins somewhat abruptly thus, but we will reserve its commencement for another chapter.
End of chapter 15. Chapter 16 of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, by Anne Brontë. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.
June 1st, 1821. We have just returned to Stanningley. That is, we returned some days ago, and I am not yet settled, and feel as if I never should be. We left town sooner than was intended, in consequence of my uncle's indisposition. I wonder what would have been the result if we had stayed the full time. I am quite ashamed of my new-sprung distaste for country life. All my former occupations seem so tedious and dull, my former amusements so insipid and unprofitable. I cannot enjoy my music, because there is no one to hear it. I cannot enjoy my walks, because there is no one to meet. I cannot enjoy my books, because they have not power to arrest my attention. My head is so haunted with the recollections of the last few weeks that I cannot attend to them. My drawing suits me best, for I can draw and think at the same time, and if my productions cannot now be seen by any one but myself, and those who do not care about them, they possibly may be hereafter. But then there is one face I am always trying to paint or to sketch, and always without success, and that vexes me. As for the owner of that face, I cannot get him out of my mind, and indeed I never try. I wonder whether he ever thinks of me, and I wonder whether I shall ever see him again. And then might follow a train of other wonderments, questions for time and fate to answer, concluding with, supposing all the rest be answered in the affirmative, I wonder whether I shall ever repent it, as my aunt would tell me I should, if she knew what I was thinking about. How distinctly I remember our conversation that evening before our departure for town, when we were sitting together over the fire, my uncle having gone to bed with a slight attack of the gout.
Helen,
said she, after a thoughtful silence,
do you ever think about marriage?
Yes, aunt, often.
And do you ever contemplate the possibility of being married yourself, or engaged, before the season is over?
Sometimes, but I don't think it at all likely that I ever shall.
Why so?
Because, I imagine, there must be only a very, very few men in the world that I should like to marry, and of those few, it is 10 to 1 I may never be acquainted with one, or if I should, it is 20 to 1 he may not happen to be single, or to take a fancy to me.
That is no argument at all. It may be very true, and I hope is true, that there are very few men whom you would choose to marry of yourself. It is not, indeed, to be supposed that you would wish to marry any one till you were asked. A girl's affections should never be won unsought. But when they are sought, when the citadel of the heart is fairly besieged, it is apt to surrender sooner than the owner is aware of, and often against her better judgment, and in opposition to all her preconceived ideas of what she could have loved, unless she be extremely careful and discreet. Now, I want to warn you, Helen, of these things, and to exhort you to be watchful and circumspect from the very commencement of your career, and not to suffer your heart to be stolen from you by the first foolish or unprincipled person that covets the possession of it. You know, my dear, you are only just 18. There's plenty of time before you, and neither your uncle nor I are in any hurry to get you off our hands, and I may venture to say there will be no lack of suitors, for you can boast a good family, a pretty considerable fortune and expectations, and I may as well tell you likewise, for if I don't, others will, that you have a fair share of beauty besides, and I hope you may never have cause to regret it.
I hope not, aunt. But why should you fear it?
Because, my dear, beauty is that quality which, next to money, is generally the most attractive to the worst kinds of men, and therefore it is likely to entail a great deal of trouble on the possessor.
Have you been troubled in that way, aunt?
No, Helen,
said she, with reproachful gravity.
But I know many that have, and some, through carelessness, have been the wretched victims of deceit, and some, through weakness, have fallen into snares and temptations terrible to relate.
Well, I shall be neither careless nor weak.
Remember Peter, Helen. Don't boast, but watch. Keep a guard over your eyes and ears as the inlets of your heart, and over your lips as the outlet, lest they betray you in a moment of unwariness. Receive, coldly and dispassionately, every attention, till you have ascertained and duly considered the worth of the aspirant, and let your affections be consequent upon approbation alone. First study, then approve, then love. Let your eyes be blind to all external attractions, your ears deaf to all the fascinations of flattery and light discourse. These are nothing, and worse than nothing, snares and wiles of the tempter to lure the thoughtless to their own destruction. Principle is the first thing, after all, and next to that, good sense, respectability, and moderate wealth. If you should marry the handsomest and most accomplished and superficially agreeable man in the world, you little know the misery that would overwhelm you if, after all, you should find him to be a worthless reprobate, or even an impracticable fool.
But what are all the poor fools and reprobates to do, aunt? If everybody followed your advice, the world would soon come to an end.
Never fear, my dear. The male fools and reprobates will never want for partners, while there are so many of the other sex to match them. But do you follow my advice? And this is no subject for jesting, Helen. I am sorry to see you treat the matter in that light way. Believe me, matrimony is a serious thing.
And she spoke it so seriously that one might have fancied she had known it to her cost. But I asked no more impertinent questions, and merely answered, "I know it is, and I know there is truth and sense in what you say. But you need not fear me, for I not only should think it wrong to marry a man that was deficient in sense or in principle, but I should never be tempted to do it, for I could not like him, if he were ever so handsome and ever so charming in other respects. I should hate him, despise him, pity him, anything but love him. My affections not only ought to be founded on approbation, but they will and must be so. For without approving, I cannot love. It is needless to say, I ought to be able to respect and honor the man I marry, as well as love him, for I cannot love him without. So set your mind at rest."
"I hope it may be so,"
answered she. "I know it is so," persisted I.
"You have not been tried yet, Helen. We can but hope,"
said she, in her cold, cautious way. I was vexed at her incredulity, but I am not sure her doubts were entirely without sagacity. I fear I have found it much easier to remember her advice than to profit by it. Indeed, I have sometimes been led to question the soundness of her doctrines on those subjects. Her counsels may be good, as far as they go, in the main points at least, but there are some things she has overlooked in her calculations. I wonder if she was ever in love. I commenced my career, or my first campaign, as my uncle calls it, kindling with bright hopes and fancies, chiefly raised by this conversation, and full of confidence in my own discretion. At first I was delighted with the novelty and excitement of our London life, but soon I began to weary of its mingled turbulence and constraint, and sigh for the freshness and freedom of home. My new acquaintances, both male and female, disappointed my expectations, and vexed and depressed me by turns, for I soon grew tired of studying their peculiarities, and laughing at their foibles, particularly as I was obliged to keep my criticisms to myself, for my aunt would not hear them, and they, the ladies especially, appeared so provokingly mindless, and heartless, and artificial. The gentlemen seemed better, but perhaps it was because I knew them less, perhaps because they flattered me, but I did not fall in love with any of them, and if their attentions pleased me one moment, they provoked me the next, because they put me out of humour with myself, by revealing my vanity and making me fear I was becoming like some of the ladies I so heartily despised. There was one elderly gentleman that annoyed me very much, a rich old friend of my uncle's, who, I believe, thought I could not do better than marry him. But, besides being old, he was ugly and disagreeable, and wicked, I am sure, though my aunt scolded me for saying so. But she allowed he was no saint. And there was another, less hateful, but still more tiresome, because she favoured him, and was always thrusting him upon me, and sounding his praises in my ears. Mr. Boreham by name, Boreham, as I prefer spelling it, for a terrible bore he was. I shudder still at the remembrance of his voice, drone, 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 in my ear, while he sat beside me, prosing away by the half-hour together, and beguiling himself with the notion that he was improving my mind by useful information, or impressing his dogmas upon me, and reforming my errors of judgment, or perhaps that he was talking down to my level, and amusing me with entertaining discourse. Yet he was a decent man enough in the main, I dare say, and if he had kept his distance, I never would have hated him. As it was almost impossible to help it, for he not only bothered me with the infliction of his own presence, but he kept me from the enjoyment of more agreeable society. One night, however, at a ball, he had been more than usually tormenting, and my patience was quite exhausted. It appeared as if the whole evening was fated to be insupportable. I had just had one dance with an empty-headed coxcomb, and then Mr. Boreham had come upon me, and seemed determined to cling to me for the rest of the night. He never danced himself, and there he sat, poking his head in my face, and impressing all beholders with the idea that he was a confirmed, acknowledged lover, my aunt looking complacently on all the time, and wishing him God-speed. In vain I attempted to drive him away by giving a loose to my exasperated feelings, even to positive rudeness. Nothing could convince him that his presence was disagreeable. Sullen silence was taken for rapt attention, and gave him greater room to talk. Sharp answers were received as smart sallies of girlish vivacity that only required an indulgent rebuke, and flat contradictions were but as oil to the flames, calling forth new strains of argument to support his dogmas, and bringing down upon me endless floods of reasoning to overwhelm me with conviction. But there was one present who seemed to have a better appreciation of my frame of mind. A gentleman stood by, who had been watching our conference for some time, evidently much amused at my companion's remorseless pertinacity and my manifest annoyance, and laughing to himself at the asperity and uncompromising spirit of my replies. At length, however, he withdrew, and went to the lady of the house, apparently for the purpose of asking an introduction to me, for shortly after they both came up, and she introduced him as Mr. Huntingdon, the son of a late friend of my uncle's. He asked me to dance. I gladly consented, of course, and he was my companion during the remainder of my stay, which was not long, for my aunt, as usual, insisted upon an early departure. I was sorry to go, for I had found my new acquaintance a very lively and entertaining companion. There was a certain graceful ease and freedom about all he said and did, that gave a sense of repose and expansion to the mind, after so much constraint and formality as I had been doomed to suffer. There might be, it is true, a little too much careless boldness in his manner and address, but I was in so good a humour, and so grateful for my late deliverance from Mr. Boreham, that it did not anger me.
"Well, Helen, how do you like Mr. Boreham now?"
said my aunt, as we took our seats in the carriage and drove away. "Worse than ever," I replied. She looked displeased, but said no more on that subject.
"Who was the gentleman you danced with last?"
resumed she, after a pause.
"That was so officious in helping you on with your shawl."
"He was not officious at all, aunt. He never attempted to help me till he saw Mr. Boreham coming to do so, and then he stepped laughingly forward and said, 'Come, I'll preserve you from that affliction.'"
"Who was it, I ask?"
said she, with frigid gravity. "It was Mr. Huntingdon, the son of uncle's old friend."
"I have heard your uncle speak of young Mr. Huntingdon. I have heard him say, 'He's a fine lad, that young Huntingdon, but a bit wildish, I fancy.' So I'd have you beware."
"What does a bit wildish mean?" I inquired.
"It means destitute of principle, and prone to every vice that is common to youth."
"But I've heard uncle say he was a sad wild fellow himself when he was young." She sternly shook her head. "He was jesting then, I suppose," said I, "and here he was speaking at random. At least, I cannot believe there is any harm in those laughing blue eyes."
"False reasoning, Helen,"
said she, with a sigh. "Well, we ought to be charitable, you know, aunt. Besides, I don't think it is false. I am an excellent physiognomist, and I always judge of people's characters by their looks, not by whether they are handsome or ugly, but by the general cast of the countenance. For instance, I should know by your countenance that you were not of a cheerful, sanguine disposition, and I should know by Mr. Wilmot's that he was a worthless old reprobate, and by Mr. Boreham's that he was not an agreeable companion, and by Mr. Huntingdon's that he was neither a fool nor a knave, though possibly neither a sage nor a saint, but that is no matter to me, as I'm not likely to meet him again, unless as an occasional partner in the ballroom. It was not so, however, for I met him again next morning. He came to call upon my uncle, apologizing for not having done so before, by saying he was only lately returned from the Continent, and had not heard, till the previous night, of my uncle's arrival in town, and after that I often met him, sometimes in public, sometimes at home, for he was very assiduous in paying his respects to his old friend, who did not, however, consider himself greatly obliged by the attention.
"I wonder what the deuce the lad means by coming so often,"
he would say.
"Can you tell, Helen? Hey? He wants none of my company, nor I his, that's certain."
"I'd wish you'd tell him so, then,"
said my aunt.
"Why? What for? If I don't want him, somebody does, mayhap."
Winking at me.
"Besides, he's a pretty tidy fortune, Peggy, you know, not such a catch as Wilmot, but then Helen won't hear of that match, for somehow these old chaps don't go down with the girls, with all their money and their experience to boot. I'll bet anything she'd rather have this young fellow without a penny than Wilmot with his house full of gold. Wouldn't you, Nell?"
"Yes, uncle, but that's not saying much for Mr. Huntington, for I'd rather be an old maid and a pauper than Mrs. Wilmot."
"And Mrs. Huntington? What would you rather be than Mrs. Huntington, eh?"
"I'll tell you when I've considered the matter."
"Ah, it needs consideration, then. But come now, would you rather be an old maid, let alone the pauper?"
"I can't tell till I'm asked." And I left the room immediately, to escape further examination. But 5 minutes after, in looking from my window, I beheld Mr. Boreham coming up to the door. I waited nearly half an hour in uncomfortable suspense, expecting every minute to be called, and vainly longing to hear him go. Then footsteps were heard on the stairs, and my aunt entered the room with a solemn countenance, and closed the door behind her.
"Here's Mr. Boreham, Helen,"
said she.
"He wishes to see you."
"Oh, aunt, can't you tell him I'm indisposed? I'm sure I am, to see him."
"Nonsense, my dear, this is no trifling matter. He is come on a very important errand, to ask your hand in marriage of your uncle and me."
"I hope my uncle and you told him it was not in your power to give it. What right had he to ask anyone before me?"
"Helen!"
"What did my uncle say?"
"He said he would not interfere in the matter. If you liked to accept Mr. Boreham's obliging offer, you—"
"Did he say obliging offer?"
"No. He said if you liked to take him you might, and if not, you might please yourself."
"He said right. And what did you say?"
"It is no matter what I said. What will you say? That is the question. He is now waiting to ask you himself, but consider well before you go, and if you intend to refuse him, give me your reasons."
"I shall refuse him, of course, but you must tell me how, for I want to be civil, and yet decided, and when I've got rid of him, I'll give you my reasons afterwards."
"But stay, Helen, sit down a little and compose yourself. Mr. Boreham is in no particular hurry, for he has little doubt of your acceptance, and I want to speak with you. Tell me, my dear, what are your objections to him? Do you deny that he is an upright, honourable man?"
"No."
"Do you deny that he is sensible, sober, respectable?"
"No. He may be all this, but—"
"But, Helen, how many such men do you expect to meet with in the world? Upright, honourable, sensible, sober, respectable. Is this such an everyday character that you should reject the possessor of such noble qualities without a moment's hesitation? Yes, noble I may call them, for think of the full meaning of each and how many inestimable virtues they include, and I might add many more to the list, and consider that all this is laid at your feet. It is in your power to secure this inestimable blessing for life, a worthy and excellent husband who loves you tenderly, but not too fondly so as to blind him to your faults, and will be your guide throughout life's pilgrimage and your partner in eternal bliss. Think how—"
"But I hate him, aunt," said I, interrupting this unusual flow of eloquence.
"Hate him? Helen, is this a Christian spirit? You hate him? And he's so good a man.
I don't hate him as a man, but as a husband. As a man, I love him so much that I wish him a better wife than I, one as good as himself, or better, if you think that possible, provided she could like him. But I never could, and therefore—
But why not? What objection do you find?
Firstly, he is at least 40 years old, considerably more, I should think, and I am but 18. Secondly, he is narrow-minded and bigoted in the extreme. Thirdly, his tastes and feelings are wholly dissimilar to mine. Fourthly, his looks, voice, and manner are particularly displeasing to me. And finally, I have an aversion to his whole person that I never can surmount.
Then you ought to surmount it. And please to compare him for a moment with Mr. Huntingdon, and, good looks apart, which contribute nothing to the merit of the man or to the happiness of married life, and which you have so often professed to hold in light esteem, tell me which is the better man.
I have no doubt Mr. Huntingdon is a much better man than you think him, but we are not talking about him now, but about Mr. Boreham, and as I would rather grow, live, and die in single blessedness than be his wife, it is but right that I should tell him so at once, and put him out of suspense. So let me go.
But don't give him a flat denial. He has no idea of such a thing, and it would offend him greatly. Say you have no thoughts of matrimony at present.
But I have thoughts of it.
Or that you desire a further acquaintance.
But I don't desire a further acquaintance. Quite the contrary. And without waiting for further admonitions, I left the room, and went to seek Mr. Boreham. He was walking up and down the drawing-room, humming snatches of tunes, and nibbling the end of his cane.
"My dear young lady,"
said he, bowing and smirking with great complacency,
"I have your kind guardian's permission."
"I know, sir," said I, wishing to shorten the scene as much as possible, "and I am greatly obliged for your preference, but must beg to decline the honour you wish to confer, for I think we were not made for each other, as you yourself would shortly discover if the experiment were tried." My aunt was right. It was quite evident he had had little doubt of my acceptance, and no idea of a positive denial. He was amazed, astounded at such an answer, but too incredulous to be much offended, and after a little humming and hawing, he returned to the attack.
"I know, my dear, that there exists a considerable disparity between us in years, in temperament, and perhaps some other things. But let me assure you, I shall not be severe to mark the faults and foibles of a young and ardent nature such as yours; and while I acknowledge them to myself, and even rebuke them with all a father's care, believe me, no youthful lover could be more tenderly indulgent towards the object of his affections than I to you. And, on the other hand, let me hope that my more experienced years and graver habits of reflection will be no disparagement in your eyes, as I shall endeavour to make them more conducive to your happiness. Come now, what do you say? Let us have no young ladies' affectations and caprices, but speak out at once."
"I will, but only to repeat what I said before, that I am certain we were not made for each other."
"You really think so?"
"I do."
"But you don't know me. You wish for a further acquaintance, a longer time to—"
"No, I don't. I know you as well as I ever shall, and better than you know me, or you would never dream of uniting yourself to one so incongruous, so utterly unsuitable to you in every way."
"But, my dear young lady, I don't look for perfection. I can excuse—"
"Thank you, Mr. Boreham, but I won't trespass upon your goodness. You may save your indulgence and consideration for some more worthy object, that won't tax them so heavily."
"But let me beg you to consult your aunt. That excellent lady, I'm sure, will—"
"I have consulted her, and I know her wishes coincide with yours, but in such important matters I take the liberty of judging for myself, and no persuasion can alter my inclinations, or induce me to believe that such a step would be conducive to my happiness or yours. And I wonder that a man of your experience and discretion should think of choosing such a wife."
"Ah, well,"
said he,
"I have sometimes wondered at that myself. I have sometimes said to myself, 'Now, Boreham, what is this you're after? Take care, man, look before you leap. This is a sweet, bewitching creature, but remember, the brightest attractions to the lover too often prove the husband's greatest torments. I assure you my choice has not been made without much reasoning and reflection. The seeming imprudence of the match has cost me many an anxious thought by day and many a sleepless hour by night. But at length I satisfied myself that it was not, in very deed, imprudent. I saw my sweet girl was not without her faults, but of these her youth, I trusted, was not one, but rather an earnest of virtues yet unblown, a strong ground of presumption that her little defects of temper and errors of judgment, opinion, or manner were not irremediable, but might easily be removed or mitigated by the patient efforts of a watchful and judicious adviser, and where I failed to enlighten and control, I thought I might safely undertake to pardon for the sake of her many excellencies. Therefore, my dearest girl, since I am satisfied, why should you object? On my account, at least.
But to tell you the truth, Mr. Boreham, it is on my own account I principally object. So let us drop the subject, I would have said, for it is worse than useless to pursue it any further. But he pertinaciously interrupted me with,
But why so? I would love you, cherish you, protect you,
etc., etc. I shall not trouble myself to put down all that passed between us. Suffice it to say, that I found him very troublesome, and very hard to convince that I really meant what I said, and really was so obstinate and blind to my own interests, that there was no shadow of a chance that either he or my aunt would ever be able to overcome my objections. Indeed, I am not sure that I succeeded after all, though wearied with his so pertinaciously returning to the same point, and repeating the same arguments over and over again, forcing me to reiterate the same replies. I at length turned short and sharp upon him, and my last words were, I tell you plainly that it cannot be. No consideration can induce me to marry against my inclinations. I respect you. At least I would respect you, if you would behave like a sensible man. But I cannot love you, and never could. And the more you talk, the further you repel me. So pray don't say any more about it. Whereupon he wished me a good morning, and withdrew, disconcerted and offended, no doubt. But surely it was not my fault.
End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, by Anne Brontë. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.
The next day I accompanied my uncle and aunt to a dinner party at Mr. Wilmot's. He had 2 ladies staying with him, his niece, Annabella, a fine dashing girl, or rather young woman, of some 25, too great a flirt to be married, according to her own assertion, but greatly admired by the gentlemen, who universally pronounced her a splendid woman, and her gentle cousin, Millicent Hargrave, who had taken a violent fancy to me, mistaking me for something vastly better than I was. And I, in return, was very fond of her. I should entirely exclude poor Millicent in my general animadversions against the ladies of my acquaintance, but it was not on her account, or her cousin's, that I have mentioned the party. It was for the sake of another of Mr. Wilmot's guests, to wit, Mr. Huntingdon. I have good reason to remember his presence there, for this was the last time I saw him. He did not sit near me at dinner, for it was his fate to hand in a capacious old dowager, and mine to be handed in by Mr. Grimsby, a friend of his, but a man I very greatly disliked. There was a sinister cast in his countenance, and a mixture of lurking ferocity and fulsome insincerity in his demeanour that I could not away with. What a tiresome custom that is, by the by! One among the many sources of fictitious annoyance of this ultra-civilized life. If the gentlemen must lead the ladies into the dining-room, why cannot they take those they like best? I am not sure, however, that Mr. Huntingdon would have taken me, if he had been at liberty to make his own selection. It is quite possible he might have chosen Miss Wilmot, for she seemed bent upon engrossing his attention to herself, and he seemed nothing loth to pay the homage she demanded. I thought so, at least, when I saw how they talked and laughed, and glanced across the table, to the neglect and evident umbrage of their respective neighbours. and afterwards, as the gentleman joined us in the drawing-room, when she, immediately upon his entrance, loudly called upon him to be the arbiter of a dispute between herself and another lady, and he answered the summons with alacrity, and decided the question without a moment's hesitation in her favour, though to my thinking she was obviously in the wrong, and then stood chatting familiarly with her and a group of other ladies, while I sat with Millicent Hargrave at the opposite end of the room, looking over the latter's drawings, and aiding her with my critical observations and advice, at her particular desire. But in spite of my efforts to remain composed, my attention wandered from the drawings to the merry group, and against my better judgment, my wrath rose, and doubtless my countenance lowered, for Millicent, observing that I must be tired of her daubs and scratches, begged I would join the company now, and defer the examination of the remainder to another opportunity. But while I was assuring her that I had no wish to join them, and was not tired, Mr. Huntingdon himself came up to the little round table at which we sat.
"Are these yours?"
said he, carelessly taking up one of the drawings. "No, they are Miss Hargrave's."
"Oh. Well, let's have a look at them."
And regardless of Miss Hargrave's protestations that they were not worth looking at, he drew a chair to my side, and receiving the drawings, one by one, from my hand, successively scanned them over, and threw them on the table, but said not a word about them, though he was talking all the time. I don't know what Millicent Hargrave thought of such conduct, but I found his conversation extremely interesting, though, as I afterwards discovered, when I came to analyse it, it was chiefly confined to quizzing the different members of the company present, and albeit he made some clever remarks, and some excessively droll ones, I do not think the whole would appear anything very particular, if written here, without the adventitious aids of look and tone and gesture, and that ineffable but indefinite charm, which cast a halo over all he did and said, and which would have made it a delight to look in his face, and hear the music of his voice, if he had been talking positive nonsense, and which, moreover, made me feel so bitter against my aunt when she put a stop to this enjoyment, by coming composedly forward, under pretence of wishing to see the drawings, that she cared and knew nothing about, and while making believe to examine them, addressing herself to Mr. Huntingdon, with one of her coldest and most repellent aspects, and beginning a series of the most commonplace and formidably formal questions and observations, on purpose to wrest his attention from me, on purpose to vex me, as I thought. And having now looked through the portfolio, I left them to their tete-a-tete, and seated myself on a sofa, quite apart from the company, never thinking how strange such conduct would appear, but merely to indulge, at first, the vexation of the moment, and subsequently to enjoy my private thoughts. But I was not left long alone, for Mr. Wilmot, of all men the least welcome, took advantage of my isolated position to come and plant himself beside me. I had flattered myself that I had so effectually repulsed his advances on all former occasions, that I had nothing more to apprehend from his unfortunate predilection. But it seems I was mistaken. So great was his confidence, either in his wealth or his remaining powers of attraction, and so firm his conviction of feminine weakness, that he thought himself warranted to return to the siege, which he did with renovated ardour, enkindled by the quantity of wine he had drunk, a circumstance that rendered him infinitely the more disgusting. But greatly as I abhorred him at that moment, I did not like to treat him with rudeness, as I was now his guest, and had just been enjoying his hospitality, and I was no hand at a polite but determined rejection, nor would it have greatly availed me if I had, for he was too coarse-minded to take any repulse that was not as plain and positive as his own effrontery. The consequence was, that he waxed more fulsomely tender, and more repulsively warm, and I was driven to the very verge of desperation, and about to say I know not what, when I felt my hand, that hung over the arm of the sofa, suddenly taken by another, and gently but fervently pressed. Instinctively I guessed who it was, and on looking up, was less surprised than delighted to see Mr. Huntingdon smiling upon me. It was like turning from some purgatorial fiend to an angel of light, come to announce that the season of torment was past.
"Helen,"
said he. He frequently called me Helen, and I never resented the freedom.
"I want you to look at this picture. Mr. Wilmot will excuse you a moment, I'm sure."
I rose with alacrity. He drew my arm within his, and led me across the room to a splendid painting of Van Dyck's that I had noticed before, but not sufficiently examined. After a moment of silent contemplation, I was beginning to comment on its beauties and peculiarities, when, playfully pressing the hand he still retained within his arm, he interrupted me with,
Never mind the picture. It was not for that I brought you here. It was to get you away from that scoundrelly old profligate yonder who was looking as if he would like to challenge me for the affront.
I am very much obliged to you, said I. This is twice you have delivered me from such unpleasant companionship.
Don't be too thankful,
he answered.
It is not all kindness to you. It is partially from a feeling of spite to your tormentors that makes me delighted to do the old fellow a bad turn, though I don't think I have any great reason to dread them as rivals. Have I, Helen?
You know I detest them both.
And me?
I have no reason to detest you.
But what are your sentiments towards me? Helen, speak. How do you regard me?
And again he pressed my hand, but I feared there was more of conscious power than tenderness in his demeanour, and I felt he had no right to extort a confession of attachment from me when he had made no correspondent avowal himself, and knew not what to answer. At last I said, "How do you regard me?"
Sweet angel, I adore you.
Helen, I want you a moment,
said the distinct low voice of my aunt, close beside us, and I left him, muttering maledictions against his evil angel. "Well, aunt, what is it? What do you want?" said I, following her to the embrasure of the window.
I want you to join the company when you are fit to be seen,
returned she, severely regarding me.
But please to stay here a little, till that shocking colour is somewhat abated, and your eyes have recovered something of their natural expression. I should be ashamed for anyone to see you in your present state.
Of course, such a remark had no effect in reducing the shocking colour. On the contrary, I felt my face glow with redoubled fires, kindled by a complication of emotions, of which indignant, swelling anger was the chief. I offered no reply, however, but pushed aside the curtain and looked into the night, or rather into the lamp-lit square.
Was Mr. Huntingdon proposing to you, Helen?
Inquired my too watchful relative. No.
What was he saying then? I heard something very like it.
I don't know what he would have said if you hadn't interrupted him.
And would you have accepted him, Helen, if he had proposed?
Of course not, without consulting uncle and you.
Oh, I'm glad, my dear, you have so much prudence left. Well, now,
she added, after a moment's pause,
you have made yourself conspicuous enough for one evening. The ladies are directing inquiring glances towards us at this moment, I see. I shall join them. Do you come too, when you are sufficiently composed to appear as usual.
I am so now.
Speak gently, then, and don't look so malicious,
said my calm but provoking aunt.
We shall return home shortly, and then,
she added with solemn significance,
I have much to say to you.
So I went home prepared for a formidable lecture. Little was said by either party in the carriage during our short transit homewards, but when I had entered my room and thrown myself into an easy-chair, to reflect on the events of the day, my aunt followed me thither, and having dismissed Rachel, who was carefully stowing away my ornaments, closed the door, and placing a chair beside me, or rather at right angles with mine, sat down. With due deference I offered her my more commodious seat. She declined it, and thus opened the conference.
Do you remember, Helen, our conversation the night but one before we left Staningley?
Yes, aunt.
And do you remember how I warned you against letting your heart be stolen from you by those unworthy of its possession, and fixing your affections where approbation did not go before, and where reason and judgment withheld their sanction?
Yes, but my reason—
Pardon me. And do you remember assuring me that there was no occasion for uneasiness on your account, for you should never be tempted to marry a man who was deficient in sense or principle, however handsome or charming in other respects he might be, for you could not love him, you should hate, despise, pity, anything but love him. Were not those your words?
Yes, but—
And did you not say that your affection must be founded on approbation, and that, unless you could approve and honour and respect, you could not love?
Yes, but I do approve, and honour, and respect.
How so, my dear? Is Mr. Huntingdon a good man?
He is a much better man than you think him.
That is nothing to the purpose. Is he a good man?
Yes, in some respects. He has a good disposition.
Is he a man of principle?
Perhaps not exactly, but it is only for want of thought. If he had someone to advise him, and remind him of what is right—
He would soon learn, you think, and you yourself would willingly undertake to be his teacher? But, my dear, he is, I believe, full 10 years older than you. How is it that you are so beforehand in moral acquirements?
Thanks to you, aunt, I have been well brought up, and had good examples always before me, which he, most likely, has not. And besides, he is of a sanguine temperament, and a gay, thoughtless temper, and I am naturally inclined to reflection.
Well, now you have made him out to be deficient in both sense and principle, by your own confession.
Then my sense and my principle are at his service.
That sounds presumptuous, Helen. Do you think you have enough for both? And do you imagine your merry, thoughtless profligate would allow himself to be guided by a young girl like you?
No, I should not wish to guide him, but I think I might have influence sufficient to save him from some errors, and I should think my life well spent in the effort to preserve so noble a nature from destruction. He always listens attentively now when I speak seriously to him, and I often venture to reprove his random way of talking, and sometimes he says that if he had me always by his side he should never do or say a wicked thing, and that a little daily talk with me would make him quite a saint. It may he partly jest and partly flattery, but still—
But still you think it may be truth?
If I do think there is any mixture of truth in it, it is not from confidence in my own powers, but in his natural goodness. And you have no right to call him a profligate, aunt. He is nothing of the kind.
Who told you so, my dear? What was that story about his intrigue with a married lady? Who was it? Miss Wilmot herself was telling you the other day.
It was false, false, I cried. I don't believe a word of it.
You think, then, that he is a virtuous, well-conducted young man?
I know nothing positive respecting his character. I only know that I have heard nothing definite against it, nothing that could be proved at least. Until people can prove their slanderous accusations, I will not believe them. And I know this, that if he has committed errors, they are only such as are common to youth, and such as nobody thinks anything about. For I see that everybody likes him, and all the mammas smile upon him, and their daughters, and Miss Wilmot herself, are only too glad to attract his attention.
Helen, the world may look upon such offences as venial. A few unprincipled mothers may be anxious to catch a young man of fortune without reference to his character, and thoughtless girls may be glad to win the smiles of so handsome a gentleman, without seeking to penetrate beyond the surface. But you, I trusted, were better informed than to see with their eyes, and judge with their perverted judgment. I did not think you would call these venial errors.
Nor do I, aunt. But if I hate the sins, I love the sinner, and would do much for his salvation, even supposing your suspicions to be mainly true, which I do not and will not believe.
Well, my dear, ask your uncle what sort of company he keeps, and if he is not banded with a set of loose, profligate young men whom he calls his friends, his jolly companions, and whose chief delight is to wallow in vice, and vie with each other who can run fastest and furthest down the headlong road to the place prepared for the devil and his angels.
Then I will save him from them.
Oh, Helen, Helen! You little know the misery of uniting your fortunes to such a man.
I have such confidence in him, aunt, notwithstanding all you say, that I would willingly risk my happiness for the chance of securing his. I will leave better men to those who only consider their own advantage. If he has done amiss, I shall consider my life well spent in saving him from the consequences of his early errors, and striving to recall him to the path of virtue. God grant me success." Here the conversation ended, for at this juncture my uncle's voice was heard from his chamber, loudly calling upon my aunt to come to bed. He was in a bad humour that night, for his gout was worse. It had been gradually increasing upon him ever since we came to town, and my aunt took advantage of the circumstance next morning to persuade him to return to the country immediately, without waiting for the close of the season. His physician supported and enforced her arguments, and, contrary to her usual habits, she so hurried the preparations for removal, as much for my sake as my uncle's, I think, that in a very few days we departed, and I saw no more of Mr. Huntingdon. My aunt flatters herself I shall soon forget him. Perhaps she thinks I have forgotten him already, for I never mention his name, and she may continue to think so, till we meet again, if ever that should be. I wonder if it will.
End of chapter 17. Chapter 18 of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, by Anne Brontë. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.
August 25th. I am now quite settled down to my usual routine of steady occupations and quiet amusements, tolerably contented and cheerful, but still looking forward to spring with the hope of returning to town, not for its gaieties and dissipations, but for the chance of meeting Mr. Huntington once again. For still he is always in my thoughts and in my dreams. In all my employments, whatever I do, or see, or hear, has an ultimate reference to him. Whatever skill or knowledge I acquire is some day to be turned to his advantage or amusement. Whatever new beauties in nature or art I discover are to be depicted to meet his eye, or stored in my memory to be told him at some future period. This, at least, is the hope that I cherish, the fancy that lights me on my lonely way. It may be only an ignis fatuus after all, but it can do no harm to follow it with my eyes and rejoice in its lustre, as long as it does not lure me from the path I ought to keep. And I think it will not, for I have thought deeply on my aunt's advice, and I see clearly now the folly of throwing myself away on one that is unworthy of all the love I have to give, and incapable of responding to the best and deepest feelings of my inmost heart, so clearly that even if I should see him again, and if he should remember me, and love me still, which, alas, is too little probable, considering how he is situated, and by whom surrounded, and if he should ask me to marry him, I am determined not to consent until I know for certain whether my aunt's opinion of him or mine is nearest the truth. For if mine is altogether wrong, it is not he that I love, it is a creature of my own imagination. But I think it is not wrong. No, no, there is a secret something, an inward instinct that assures me I am right. There is essential goodness in him, and what delight to unfold it! If he has wandered, what bliss to recall him! If he is now exposed to the baneful influence of corrupting and wicked companions, what glory to deliver him from them! Oh, if I could but believe that Heaven has designed me for this! To-day is the 1st of September, but my uncle has ordered the gamekeeper to spare the partridges till the gentlemen come. What gentlemen? I asked when I heard it. A small party he had invited to shoot. His friend Mr. Wilmot was one, and my aunt's friend, Mr. Boreham, another. This struck me as terrible news at the moment, but all regret and apprehension vanished like a dream when I heard that Mr. Huntington was actually to be a third. My aunt is greatly against his coming, of course. She earnestly endeavoured to dissuade my uncle from asking him, but he, laughing at her objections, told her it was no use talking, for the mischief was already done. He had invited Huntington and his friend Lord Loughborough before we left London, and nothing now remained but to fix the day for their coming. So he is safe, and I am sure of seeing him. I cannot express my joy. I find it very difficult to conceal it from my aunt, but I don't wish to trouble her with my feelings till I know whether I ought to indulge them or not. If I find it my absolute duty to suppress them, they shall trouble no one but myself. And if I can really feel myself justified in indulging this attachment, I can dare anything, even the anger and grief of my best friend, for its object. Surely I shall soon know, but they are not coming till about the middle of the month. We are to have 2 lady visitors also. Mr. Wilmot is to bring his niece and her cousin Millicent. I suppose my aunt thinks the latter will benefit me by her society, and the salutary example of her gentle deportment and lowly intractable spirit, and the former, I suspect, she intends as a species of counter-attraction to win Mr. Huntington's attention from me. I don't thank her for this, but I shall be glad of Millicent's company. She is a sweet, good girl, and I wish I were like her, more like her, at least, than I am. 19th. They are come. They came the day before yesterday. The gentlemen are all gone out to shoot, and the ladies are with my aunt, at work in the drawing-room. I have retired to the library, for I am very unhappy, and I want to be alone. Books cannot divert me, so having opened my desk, I will try what may be done by detailing the cause of my uneasiness. This paper will serve instead of a confidential friend into whose ear I might pour forth the overflowings of my heart. It will not sympathize with my distresses, but then it will not laugh at them, and if I keep it close, it cannot tell again. So it is, perhaps, the best friend I could have for the purpose. First, let me speak of his arrival. How I sat at my window and watched for nearly 2 hours before his carriage entered the park gates, for they all came before him, and how deeply I was disappointed at every arrival because it was not his. First came Mr. Wilmot and the ladies. When Millicent had got into her room, I quitted my post a few minutes to look in upon her and have a little private conversation, for she was now my intimate friend, several long epistles having passed between us since our parting. On returning to my window, I beheld another carriage at the door. Was it his? No, it was Mr. Boreham's plain dark chariot, and there stood he upon the steps, carefully superintending the dislodging of his various boxes and packages. What a collection! One would have thought he projected a visit of 6 months at least. A considerable time after, came Lord Loughborough in his barouche. Is he one of the profligate friends, I wonder? I should think not, for no one could call him a jolly companion, I'm sure. And besides, he appears too sober and gentlemanly in his demeanour to merit such suspicions. He is a tall, thin, gloomy-looking man, apparently between 30 and 40, and of a somewhat sickly, careworn aspect. At last Mr. Huntington's light phaeton came bowling merrily up the lawn. I had but a transient glimpse of him, for the moment it stopped, he sprang out over the side on to the portico steps, and disappeared into the house. I now submitted to be dressed for dinner, a duty which Rachel had been urging upon me for the last 20 minutes, and when that important business was completed, I repaired to the drawing-room, where I found Mr. and Miss Wilmot and Millicent Hargrave already assembled. Shortly after, Lord Loughborough entered, and then Mr. Boreham, who seemed quite willing to forget and forgive my former conduct, and to hope that a little conciliation and steady perseverance on his part might yet succeed in bringing me to reason. While I stood at the window, conversing with Millicent, he came up to me, and was beginning to talk in nearly his usual strain, when Mr. Huntington entered the room. "How will he greet me, I wonder?" said my bounding heart, and instead of advancing to meet him, I turned to the window to hide or subdue my emotion. But having saluted his host and hostess, and the rest of the company, he came to me, ardently squeezed my hand, and murmured he was glad to see me once again. At that moment dinner was announced. My aunt desired him to take Miss Hargrave into the dining-room, and odious Mr. Wilmot, with unspeakable grimaces, offered his arm to me, and I was condemned to sit between himself and Mr. Boreham. But afterwards, when we were all again assembled in the drawing-room, I was indemnified for so much suffering by a few delightful minutes of conversation with Mr. Huntington. In the course of the evening, Miss Wilmot was called upon to sing and play for the amusement of the company, and I to exhibit my drawings, and though he likes music, and she is an accomplished musician, I think I am right in affirming that he paid more attention to my drawings than to her music. So far, so good. But hearing him pronounce, sotto voce, but with peculiar emphasis, concerning one of the pieces,
"This is better than all,"
I looked up, curious to see which it was, and to my horror beheld him complacently gazing at the back of the picture. It was his own face that I had sketched there, and forgotten to rub out. To make matters worse, in the agony of the moment, I attempted to snatch it from his hand, but he prevented me, and exclaiming,
"No, by George, I'll keep it,"
placed it against his waistcoat, and buttoned his coat upon it with a delighted chuckle. Then, drawing a candle close to his elbow, he gathered all the drawings to himself, as well what he had seen as the others, and muttering,
"I must look at both sides now,"
he eagerly commenced an examination, which I watched at first with tolerable composure, in the confidence that his vanity would not be gratified by any further discoveries; for, though I must plead guilty to having disfigured the backs of several, with abortive attempts to delineate that too fascinating physiognomy, I was sure that, with that one unfortunate exception, I had carefully obliterated all such witnesses of my infatuation. But the pencil frequently leaves an impression upon cardboard that no amount of rubbing can efface. Such it seems was the case with most of these, and, I confess, I trembled when I saw him holding them so close to the candle, and poring so intently over the seeming blanks; but still, I trusted, he would not be able to make out those dim traces to his own satisfaction. I was mistaken, however. Having ended his scrutiny, he quietly remarked,
"I perceive the backs of young ladies' drawings, like the postscripts of their letters, are the most important and interesting part of the concern."
Then, leaning back in his chair, he reflected a few minutes in silence, complacently smiling to himself, and while I was concocting some cutting speech wherewith to check his gratification, He rose, and passing over to where Annabella Wilmot sat vehemently coquetting with Lord Loughborough, seated himself on the sofa beside her, and attached himself to her for the rest of the evening. So then, thought I, he despises me, because he knows I love him, and the reflection made me so miserable I knew not what to do. Millicent came and began to admire my drawings, and make remarks upon them. But I could not talk to her. I could talk to no one, and upon the introduction of tea, I took advantage of the open door, and the slight diversion caused by its entrance, to slip out, for I was sure I could not take any, and take refuge in the library. My aunt sent Thomas in quest of me, to ask if I were not coming to tea, but I bade him say I should not take any to-night, and happily she was too much occupied with her guests to make any further inquiries at the time. As most of the company had travelled far that day, they retired early to rest, and having heard them all, as I thought, go upstairs, I ventured out, to get my candlestick from the drawing-room sideboard. But Mr. Huntingdon had lingered behind the rest. He was just at the foot of the stairs when I opened the door, and hearing my step in the hall, though I could hardly hear it myself, he instantly turned back.
"Helen, is that you?"
said he.
"Why did you run away from us?"
"Good night, Mr. Huntingdon," said I coldly, not choosing to answer the question, and I turned away to enter the drawing-room.
"But you'll shake hands, won't you?"
said he, placing himself in the doorway before me, and he seized my hand and held it, much against my will. "Let me go, Mr. Huntingdon," said I. "I want to get a candle."
"The candle will keep,"
returned he. I made a desperate effort to free my hand from his grasp.
"Why are you in such a hurry to leave me, Helen?"
he said, with a smile of the most provoking self-sufficiency.
"You don't hate me, you know."
"Yes, I do, at this moment."
"Not you. It is Annabella Wilmot you hate, not me."
"I have nothing to do with Annabella Wilmot," said I, burning with indignation.
"But I have, you know,"
returned he, with peculiar emphasis. "That is nothing to me, sir," I retorted.
"Is it nothing to you, Helen? Will you swear it? Will you?"
"No, I won't, Mr. Huntingdon, and I will go," cried I, not knowing whether to laugh, or to cry, or to break out into a tempest of fury.
"Go then, you vixen,"
he said, but the instant he released my hand, he had the audacity to put his arm round my neck and kiss me. Trembling with anger and agitation, and I don't know what besides, I broke away, and got my candle, and rushed upstairs to my room. He would not have done so, but for that hateful picture, and there he had it still in his possession, an eternal monument to his pride and my humiliation. It was but little sleep I got that night, and in the morning I rose perplexed and troubled with the thoughts of meeting him at breakfast. I knew not how it was to be done. An assumption of dignified, cold indifference would hardly do, after what he knew of my devotion, to his face at least. Yet something must be done to check his presumption. I would not submit to be tyrannized over by those bright laughing eyes, and accordingly I received his cheerful morning salutation as calmly and coldly as my aunt could have wished, and defeated with brief answers his one or two attempts to draw me into conversation, while I comported myself with unusual cheerfulness and complaisance towards every other member of the party, especially Annabella Wilmot, and even her uncle and Mr. Boreham were treated with an extra amount of civility on the occasion, not from any motives of coquetry, but just to show him that my particular coolness and reserve arose from no general ill humour or depression of spirits. He was not, however, to be repelled by such acting as this. He did not talk much to me, but when he did speak, it was with a degree of freedom and openness, and kindliness too, that plainly seemed to intimate he knew his words were music to my ears, and when his looks met mine it was with a smile, presumptuous it might be, but oh, so sweet, so bright, so genial, that I could not possibly retain my anger. Every vestige of displeasure soon melted away beneath it, like morning clouds before the summer sun. Soon after breakfast, all the gentlemen save one, with boyish eagerness, set out on their expedition against the hapless partridges, my uncle and Mr. Wilmot on their shooting ponies, Mr. Huntingdon and Lord Loughborough on their legs, the one exception being Mr. Boreham, who, in consideration of the rain that had fallen during the night, thought it prudent to remain behind a little, and join them in a while when the sun had dried the grass. And he favoured us all with a long and minute disquisition upon the evils and dangers attendant upon damp feet, delivered with the most imperturbable gravity, amid the jeers and laughter of Mr. Huntingdon and my uncle, who, leaving the prudent sportsman to entertain the ladies with his medical discussions, sallied forth with their guns, bending their steps to the stables first, to have a look at the horses and let out the dogs. Not desirous of sharing Mr. Boreham's company for the whole of the morning, I betook myself to the library, and there brought forth my easel and began to paint. The easel and the painting apparatus would serve as an excuse for abandoning the drawing-room, if my aunt should come to complain of the desertion, and besides, I wanted to finish the picture. It was one I had taken great pains with, and I intended it to be my masterpiece, though it was somewhat presumptuous in the design. By the bright azure of the sky, and by the warm and brilliant lights and deep long shadows, I had endeavoured to convey the idea of a sunny morning. I had ventured to give more of the bright verdure of spring or early summer to the grass and foliage than is commonly attempted in painting. The scene represented was an open glade in a wood. A group of dark Scotch firs was introduced in the middle distance, to relieve the prevailing freshness of the rest, but in the foreground was part of the gnarled trunk and of the spreading boughs of a large forest tree, whose foliage was of a brilliant golden green, not golden from autumnal mellowness, but from the sunshine and the very immaturity of the scarce expanded leaves. Upon this bough, that stood out in bold relief against the sombre firs, was seated an amorous pair of turtle-doves, whose soft sad-coloured plumage afforded a contrast of another nature; and beneath it a young girl was kneeling on the daisy-spangled turf, with head thrown back and masses of fair hair falling on her shoulders, her hands clasped, lips parted, and eyes intently gazing upward in pleased yet earnest contemplation of those feathered lovers, too deeply absorbed in each other to notice her. I had scarcely settled to my work, which, however, wanted but a few touches to the finishing, when the sportsmen passed the window on their return from the stables. It was partly open, and Mr. Huntingdon must have seen me as he went by, for in half a minute he came back, and setting his gun against the wall, threw up the sash and sprang in, and set himself before my picture.
"Very pretty, I faith,"
said he, after attentively regarding it for a few seconds.
"and a very fitting study for a young lady. Spring just opening into summer, morning just approaching noon, girlhood just ripening into womanhood, and hope just verging on fruitation. She's a sweet creature, but why didn't you make her black hair?"
"I thought light hair would suit her better. You see I have made her blue-eyed and plump, and fair and rosy."
"Upon my word, a very Hebe. I should fall in love with her if I hadn't the artist before me. Sweet innocent. She's thinking there will come a time when she will be wooed and won like that pretty hen-dove by as fond and fervent a lover, and she's thinking how pleasant it will be, and how tender and faithful he will find her."
"And perhaps," suggested I, "how tender and faithful she shall find him."
"Perhaps, for there is no limit to the wild extravagance of Hope's imaginings at such an age."
"Do you call that, then, one of her wild, extravagant delusions?"
"No. My heart tells me it is not. I might have thought so once, but now I say, give me the girl I love, and I will swear eternal constancy to her, and her alone, through summer and winter, through youth and age, and life and death, if age and death must come."
He spoke this in such serious earnest that my heart bounded with delight, but the minute after he changed his tone and asked, with a significant smile, if I had
"Any more portraits?"
"No," replied I, reddening with confusion and wrath. But my portfolio was on the table. He took it up, and coolly sat down to examine its contents. "Mr. Huntington, those are my unfinished sketches," cried I, "and I never let any one see them." And I placed my hand on the portfolio to wrest it from him, but he maintained his hold, assuring me that he
liked unfinished sketches of all things.
"But I hate them to be seen," returned I. "I can't let you have it, indeed."
"Let me have its bowels, then,"
said he, and just as I wrenched the portfolio from his hand, he deftly abstracted the greater part of its contents, and after turning them over a moment, he cried out,
"Bless my stars, here's another,"
and slipped a small oval of ivory paper into his waistcoat pocket, a complete miniature portrait that I had sketched with such tolerable success as to be induced to colour it with great pains and care, but I was determined he should not keep it. "Mr. Huntington," cried I insist upon having that back. It is mine, and you have no right to take it. Give it to me directly. I'll never forgive you if you don't." But the more vehemently I insisted, the more he aggravated my distress by his insulting, gleeful laugh. At length, however, he restored it to me, saying,
Well, well, since you value it so much, I'll not deprive you of it.
To show him how I valued it, I tore it in two and threw it into the fire. He was not prepared for this. His merriment suddenly ceasing, he stared in mute amazement at the consuming treasure, and then, with a careless
I'll go and shoot now,
he turned on his heel and vacated the apartment by the window as he came, and setting on his hat with an air, took up his gun and walked away, whistling as he went, and leaving me not too much agitated to finish my picture, for I was glad at the moment that I had vexed him. When I returned to the drawing-room, I found Mr. Boreham had ventured to follow his comrades to the field, and shortly after lunch, to which they did not think of returning, I volunteered to accompany the ladies in a walk, and show Annabella and Millicent the beauties of the country. We took a long ramble, and re-entered the park just as the sportsmen were returning from their expedition. Toil-spent and travel-stained, the main body of them crossed over the grass to avoid us, but Mr. Huntingdon, all spattered and splashed as he was, and stained with the blood of his prey, to the no small offence of my aunt's strict sense of propriety, came out of his way to meet us, with cheerful smiles and words for all but me, and placing himself between Annabella Wilmot and myself, walked up the road and began to relate the various exploits and disasters of the day in a manner that would have convulsed me with laughter if I had been on good terms with him. But he addressed himself entirely to Annabella, and I, of course, left all the laughter and all the badinage to her, and affecting the utmost indifference to whatever passed between them, walked along a few paces apart, and looking every way but theirs, while my aunt and Millicent went before, linked arm in arm, and gravely discoursing together. At length Mr. Huntingdon turned to me, and addressing me in a confidential whisper, said,
Helen, why did you burn my picture?
Because I wished to destroy it, I answered, with an asperity it is useless now to lament.
Oh, very good,
was the reply.
If you don't value me, I must turn to somebody that will.
I thought it was partly in jest, a half-playful mixture of mock resignation and pretended indifference, but immediately he resumed his place beside Miss Wilmot, and from that hour to this, during all that evening, and all the next day, and the next, and the next, and all this morning, the 22nd, he has never given me one kind word, or one pleasant look, never spoken to me but from pure necessity, never glanced towards me but with a cold, unfriendly look I thought him quite incapable of assuming. My aunt observes the change, and though she has not inquired the cause, or made any remark to me on the subject, I see it gives her pleasure. Miss Wilmot observes it too, and triumphantly ascribes it to her own superior charms and blandishments. But I am truly miserable, more so than I like to acknowledge to myself. Pride refuses to aid me. It has brought me into this scrape, and will not help me out of it. He meant no harm. It was only his joyous, playful spirit, and I, by my acrimonious resentment, so serious, so disproportioned to the offence, have so wounded his feelings, so deeply offended him, that I fear he will never forgive me, and all for a mere jest. He thinks I dislike him, and he must continue to think so. I must lose him for ever, and Annabella may win him, and triumph as she will. But it is not my loss, nor her triumph that I deplore so greatly, as the wreck of my fond hopes for his advantage, and her unworthiness of his affection, and the injury he will do himself by trusting his happiness to her. She does not love him. She thinks only of herself. She cannot appreciate the good that is in him. She will neither see it, nor value it, nor cherish it. She will neither deplore his faults, nor attempt their amendment, but rather aggravate them by her own. And I doubt whether she will not deceive him after all. I see she is playing double between him and Lord Loughborough, and while she amuses herself with the lively Huntingdon, she tries her utmost to enslave his moody friend, and should she succeed in bringing both to her feet, the fascinating commoner will have but little chance against the lordly peer. If he observes her artful by-play, it gives him no uneasiness, but rather adds new zest to his diversion, by opposing a stimulating check to his otherwise too easy conquest. Messieurs Wilmot and Boreham have severally taken occasion by his neglect of me to renew their advances, and if I were like Annabella, and some others, I should take advantage of their perseverance, to endeavour to pique him into a revival of affection. But, justice and honesty apart, I could not bear to do it. I am annoyed enough by their present persecutions, without encouraging them further, and even if I did, it would have precious little effect upon him. He sees me suffering under the condescending attentions and prosaic discourses of the one, and the repulsive obtrusions of the other, without so much as a shadow of commiseration for me, or resentment against my tormentors. He never could have loved me, or he would not have resigned me so willingly, and he would not go on talking to everybody else so cheerfully as he does, laughing and jesting with Lord Loughborough and my uncle, teasing Millicent Hargrave, and flirting with Annabella Wilmot, as if nothing were on his mind. Oh, why can't I hate him? I must be infatuated, or I should scorn to regret him as I do. But I must rally all the powers I have remaining, and try to tear him from my heart. There goes the dinner bell, and here comes my aunt to scold me for sitting here at my desk all day, instead of staying with the company. Wish the company were gone.
End of chapter 18.